Hello and welcome, brave souls, to another spine-chilling journey into the darkest corners of America. Tonight, we will explore 25 of the scariest urban legends that have been whispered about for decades, passed down from town to town, leaving a trail of fear and fascination in their wake. These are tales that blur the line between fact and fiction, stories that make you second-guess the shadows outside your window, the strange sounds in an empty hallway, and the roads you thought you knew. Buckle up as we dive into America's most terrifying urban legends. On a quiet suburban evening, a teenage girl named Lisa settled into the cozy living room of a spacious, two-story home. She had been hired to babysit for the evening while Mr. and Mrs. Thompson attended a dinner party across town. The children, ages 7 and 10, were tucked into their bedrooms upstairs, giggling softly as they drifted toward sleep. The house, modern and well-lit, should have felt safe, but there was an unease lingering in the air, subtle at first, like a shadow stretching across the corners of the living room. Lisa busied herself by tidying up toys and preparing a snack. The hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the living room clock, the only sounds filling the space. She had babysat countless times before, and she was confident in her ability to handle the night. Still, as she sipped her soda and watched the children's favorite cartoon, her phone rang. The display showed no caller ID. Puzzled, she answered. "Have you checked on the children?" A deep, raspy voice demanded. Lisa's heart skipped a beat. I just did," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "They're fine." There was silence on the other end before the voice rasped again, colder this time. "Go upstairs and make sure." Lisa's unease grew. She peered at the stairway leading to the children's rooms, the shadows stretching long in the dim light. Shaking off the fear, she convinced herself it was a prank call, a misguided attempt at humor. Nevertheless, she went upstairs to check on the children. Both were asleep, tucked safely under their blankets, oblivious to the tension thickening in the house. Returning to the living room, Lisa tried to focus on the TV, but the phone rang again. Her fingers shook as she picked it up. "Did you check the children?" The voice hissed, almost angrily now. "Yes," Lisa snapped, trying to maintain composure. "They're asleep." A chilling silence followed, broken only by the faint static in the line. Then came the voice again, whispering, "They won't be if you don't check upstairs." Panic surged through her. Something wasn't right. Her eyes darted toward the staircase, and a cold realization began to creep over her. This wasn't just a prank. She remembered an old story her friend had mentioned, a tale about babysitters who received threatening calls only to discover the danger was inside the house. Her breath quickened as she dialed 911, whispering urgently to the operator about the calls. The dispatcher instructed her to keep the children in their rooms and stay on the line. Minutes passed like hours as she clutched the phone, her eyes scanning every corner of the living room and hallway. The phone rang again, and Lisa flinched, her heart hammering in her chest. The same sinister voice demanded, "Go check on them now." Before she could react, the living room lights flickered and went out, plunging her into darkness. The hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the clock were replaced by an oppressive silence. Every instinct screamed at her that the intruder was no longer on the other end of the line. It was here, somewhere inside the house. Lisa's hand shook as she fumbled for a flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the familiar furniture and framed family photos. But the shadows seemed to move just beyond her sight. She crept toward the staircase, every creak of the wooden steps echoing in her ears. The voice on the phone whispered again, though this time it seemed impossibly close, almost behind her. "Check on them now." Terror spurred her forward as she reached the top of the stairs. She opened the door to the children's room, holding her flashlight like a shield. Both children were still asleep, but she noticed the closet door slightly ajar, a shadow retreating into the darkness. A muffled thump came from the other bedroom, and Lisa's pulse quickened. She remembered the dispatcher's words, "Stay calm, stay on the line, and don't confront the intruder." Seconds later, the sound of sirens pierced the night. Police had arrived, responding quickly to the emergency call. Officers entered the house cautiously, sweeping the rooms and checking closets, under beds, and behind doors. The children were safe, But in the attic, they discovered the source of the terrifying calls. A man, crouched among old boxes and insulation, holding the phone receiver, trying to sow fear from within. The intruder was arrested, and the story of Lisa's bravery spread through the neighborhood. She had kept her composure, followed instructions, and protected the children from harm. Yet, the fear lingered. Every time she walked past a staircase, her mind drifted back to that night, the sinister voice, the flickering lights, the shadows that moved on their own. The legend of the babysitter and the man upstairs has endured for generations. Haunting sleepovers, suburban streets, and cautionary tales told to children across America. It is a story that plays on one of the deepest human fears, the vulnerability of being alone in a familiar space, knowing that danger might be closer than you ever imagined. Families whisper it to their teenagers, horror writers adapt it for screenplays, and every new babysitter is warned of the chilling possibility that the terror might be coming from inside the very house they think is safe. On a quiet summer night, a group of teenagers gathered in a dimly lit bedroom, the air thick with excitement and nervous laughter. They had spent the evening telling ghost stories, daring one another to venture into the woods behind the house, and whispering about urban legends that promised thrills and chills. But now, the dare that had silenced their playful chatter was about to begin. The legend of Bloody Mary. The story was simple, yet terrifying. Stand before a mirror, in a darkened room, and say her name 3 times. Some versions insisted you must spin around after each utterance. Others warned that she would appear as a bloodied, vengeful spirit, ready to punish the bold or the foolish. Though no one knew the true origin of Bloody Mary, her legend had persisted for decades, whispered from one generation to the next. Sleepovers had become the perfect stage for testing courage, for confronting the unknown, and for seeing if the veil between the living and the dead could be pierced. At the center of the bedroom, a full-length mirror stood against the wall, its silvered surface reflecting the wide-eyed teenagers gathered in a circle. Candles had been placed strategically on the dresser, their flickering light casting shadows that danced across the walls. A mixture of excitement and terror pulsed through the group. The rules were clear. Only one person could attempt the ritual at a time. The room must be silent, and the mirror must be stared into without blinking for a full 30 seconds after the final invocation. Jenny, the youngest of the group, volunteered first. Her friends teased and encouraged her, but their voices trembled with the same nervous energy she felt. She approached the mirror, heart pounding in her chest, and took a deep breath. The others huddled together at the edge of the room, clutching one another's hands for comfort, glancing nervously at the darkened corners. "Bloody Mary," Jenny whispered, her voice barely audible. Her reflection stared back at her, pale and unyielding. The room felt colder now, as if the shadows themselves had deepened, pressing in from all sides. "Bloody Mary," she said again, louder this time, the words echoing slightly in the stillness. The candles flickered violently, and a chill swept through the room. By the third utterance, Jenny's hands were shaking. She could see her own reflection beginning to distort, the corners of the mirror darkening as if something behind her were moving closer. A shadow, subtle at first, grew along the edges of her reflection. Then, a faint redness appeared across the glass, like streaks of blood, forming slowly, dripping downward. Her breath came in shallow gasps. The room was silent except for the faint scratching sound that seemed to come from the mirror itself. Her friends whispered nervously, urging her to turn away. But curiosity and fear held her gaze. Then, as if emerging from the glass, a figure began to take shape. A woman, her face obscured by long dark hair, matted with blood, her eyes black and hollow, her mouth twisted into a silent scream, and Jenny could feel the room grow colder still, as if the spirit's presence had carried winter itself into the bedroom. The figure's hands reached toward the glass, palms pressing against the mirror, as if trying to cross over into the room. Jenny screamed, stumbling backward, and her friends rushed to her side. The candles flickered and went out, plunging the room into near darkness. For a long, terrifying moment, there was only silence and the faint sound of the girls' racing hearts. When a lighter was struck, casting a small circle of light across the mirror, the apparition was gone. Only Jenny's pale reflection stared back at her, soaked in the lingering fear of the encounter. Shaken but unharmed, Jenny retold her experience, insisting she had seen Bloody Mary. Her friends, wide-eyed and trembling, debated whether it had been her imagination, a trick of the flickering candles, or something more sinister. The room still felt colder than before, the air heavy with tension and the residual dread of the legend's power. Despite the fear, a sense of exhilaration spread among them. They had faced the story, and now it was part of their own shared memory, passed along as both a cautionary tale and a rite of passage. The legend of Bloody Mary endures because it taps into a deep, universal fear. The idea that a spirit might be watching, waiting, and capable of crossing the line between reflection and reality. It has been whispered at countless sleepovers, challenged with bravado and trembling hands, each telling reinforcing the myth and embedding it deeper into American folklore. Over time, countless variations have emerged, each with new rules, added terrors, or personal twists. Yet the core of the story remains the same: a mirror, a name, and the courage to stare into the unknown. Even today, teenagers gather with friends, daring each other to speak the name 3 times, testing the legend that has haunted generations. Some see nothing but their own reflection, while others claim fleeting glimpses of a bloodied figure just beyond the glass, leaving their hearts racing and imaginations ignited. It is a story that reminds us all that fear is powerful, that the line between myth and reality can be blurred, and that sometimes the greatest terror lies not in what is outside the room, but in what might be staring back at you from the mirror. It was a dark, rainy night on a quiet stretch of highway. The kind of night where every passing car seemed swallowed by shadows and the rhythmic tapping of windshield wipers barely cut through the storm. Emily had just finished a late shift at the diner and was driving home alone. The road ahead was nearly empty, the yellow lines blurred by the rain, and the hum of her tires against the asphalt was the only constant. She had always enjoyed driving at night, the solitude and calm. But tonight something felt different, a tension she couldn't quite place. As she rounded a bend, the headlights of a car appeared in her rearview mirror, staying at a distance, but steadily following. Emily tried not to think much of it, assuming it was just another driver heading the same way. The vehicle stayed behind her, occasionally flashing its brights, then dimming, a flickering pattern that made her uneasy. Her hands tightened on the wheel, knuckles white. The rain-slicked road reflected the lights in streaks, making it difficult to gauge distance, and a creeping feeling of being watched settled over her. Minutes passed, and Emily began to notice the car following her more insistently. Every time she checked the rearview mirror, the vehicle seemed closer, its headlights glaring like eyes in the darkness. Her heartbeat quickened. Then, suddenly, the car's hazard lights began to flash repeatedly. Emily frowned, unsure what to make of it. She slowed down, pulling to the shoulder slightly, but the other driver stayed just behind her. Then came the first warning, a series of rapid flashes from the headlights, a silent signal that something was wrong. Panic prickled along Emily's spine. She remembered the stories she had heard as a teenager, the legend of the killer in the back seat. The tales had circulated for years. Drivers, alone on isolated roads, warned by another motorist that a murderer was hiding in their car, crouched behind them, waiting for the perfect moment. It was the kind of story that had always seemed silly at first, an urban legend meant to thrill and scare. But now, with the storm pounding and the empty road stretching ahead, the story felt unnervingly real. Emily's mind raced as she tried to think clearly. Should she stop? Should she speed up? The car behind her flashed its lights again, a frantic pattern that felt like an urgent plea. Something about it was desperate, almost panicked. Then she saw movement in her rearview mirror, brief, fleeting shadows shifting in the back seat. Something crouched low, trying to remain hidden. Her stomach dropped. The legend wasn't just a story. It was happening to her. Without thinking, she slammed on the brakes, pulling into the nearest gas station she could see illuminated in the distance. The car behind her followed, but this time the driver jumped out, waving his arms frantically. "Get out of the car. There's someone in your back seat," he shouted. Emily froze for a moment, heart pounding, then obeyed, leaping from the vehicle and backing away. Police later confirmed what had almost become a nightmare. A man, armed and intent on attacking anyone he could find, had been crouched in her back seat the entire time, hidden beneath a coat and the shadow of the darkness. Had she ignored the warnings, the story could have ended differently. The other motorists' desperate signals had saved her life, the modern retelling of an age-old fear playing out in real time. The legend of the killer in the back seat endures because it taps into something deeply human, the fear of the unseen, the terror that danger might be closer than you think, lurking just out of sight while the world appears calm and familiar. It preys on the vulnerability of being alone in a vehicle, isolated, with nowhere to run, while the very place you feel safest, the cry is infiltrated by someone intent on harm. Generations have shared this story, embellishing it, spreading it as a cautionary tale, warning friends and strangers alike to check the back seat before driving and to always remain vigilant. While some dismiss the tale as nothing more than an urban legend, countless drivers have reported eerie encounters, moments when the ordinary transformed into terror, when a shadow in the rearview mirror or a sudden feeling of being watched hinted at the lurking possibility of danger. It is a story that feeds on instinct and awareness, reminding us that even in familiar surroundings, the unexpected can strike at any moment. The night Emily faced her own encounter with the legend left her shaken but profoundly aware of the fragility of safety. Every drive afterward, every glance in the rearview mirror, was imbued with the knowledge that what we cannot see can sometimes be the most dangerous. The legend continues to live on because it is not only a story, but a warning and a lesson wrapped in fear. A reminder that vigilance can save lives. The killer in the back seat is more than myth. It is the embodiment of our deepest anxieties, played out on the dark, empty roads where every shadow could conceal a threat, and every passing headlight might be signaling the difference between life and death. And so the story persists, whispered to teenagers at sleepovers, told around campfires, shared in hushed tones to friends heading home late at night. The terror is universal because the fear is universal. The idea that danger may be closer than we imagine, hidden where we least expect it, waiting, crouched in the shadows of our own familiarity. It was a cold, foggy evening when Mark decided to take the long drive home from a friend's party. The road stretched through winding country lanes, flanked by fields and dense forests. The mist clung to the asphalt, reducing visibility and making the headlights seem like lonely beacons in an endless sea of gray. He had just passed a curve near the outskirts of town when he noticed a figure standing by the roadside. She was a young woman, her long hair damp from the fog, wearing a pale dress that looked almost luminous in the car's headlights. Something about her made Mark hesitate, a feeling that was both inviting and unsettling. She lifted her thumb in the universal gesture of hitchhiking. Against his better judgment, Mark slowed and pulled over, rolling down the window. "Where are you headed?" he asked, keeping his voice steady, despite the shiver crawling down his spine. "Just down the road," she said softly, her voice melodic but distant, as if carried on the mist itself. She climbed into the passenger seat, her movements graceful and quiet. There was an odd chill in the car, a sudden drop in temperature that made Mark tug his jacket tighter around himself. As they drove, Mark tried to make conversation, but the woman offered only brief, cryptic replies. Her eyes were fixed on the mist outside the windshield, and her expression was somber, almost mournful. The silence between them was heavy, punctuated only by the rhythmic swish of windshield wipers and the occasional groan of the old car engine. They passed landmarks Mark had driven by countless times, but there was a strange feeling of disorientation. The road seemed to stretch on longer than it should, each bend and turn repeating in a loop. Finally, as they approached an old cemetery on the outskirts of town, the woman turned to him. "This is where I need to be," she said quietly. Her words were soft but carried a weight that made Mark pause, gripping the steering wheel tightly. Before he could respond, she was gone. The passenger seat was empty. The door closed and locked, yet no sign of her remained outside. No footprints in the fog, no trace of her presence. Nothing. Mark sat frozen for several moments, his heart racing and his mind trying to make sense of what had just occurred. He could not explain it. Panic mingled with curiosity as he turned the car around and drove back toward town, replaying every detail in his mind. When he finally reached the local diner, still shaken, he recounted the encounter to the waitress and a few patrons. An elderly man at the counter frowned thoughtfully. "You're not the first to see her," he said gravely. "That girl, she's been hitchhiking for decades. People pick her up all the time, but she never makes it home. She's been dead for years." Mark frowned, confused and skeptical. "Dead? What do you mean?" The man pointed toward the old cemetery. "There was a car accident on that road nearly 20 years ago. A young woman, about her age, was killed in a hit and run. Ever since, people have reported seeing her on foggy nights, trying to get home. But no one has ever actually taken her anywhere. She vanishes before the ride ends." The story sent a chill through Mark's body. The details matched too closely to be coincidence. The dress, the location, the quiet sadness in her eyes. He remembered the eerie stillness in the car, the inexplicable cold that seemed to cling to her presence. The realization settled in slowly, a creeping dread that filled every corner of his mind. He had picked up a spirit, a soul, trapped in a liminal space between life and death, forever seeking passage home. The legend of the vanishing hitchhiker has persisted across towns and decades, morphing slightly with each retelling but retaining its core terror. Drivers on isolated roads, especially on foggy nights or near cemeteries, speak of picking up a young woman who disappears without explanation. Sometimes she leaves behind a personal item, a scarf, a coat, a photograph that disappears by morning or later reveals her true identity. Often, the ghost is tied to a tragic accident, a life ended too soon, a story of unresolved grief echoing into the present. Mark drove home that night in silence, the road ahead feeling longer and emptier than ever. Every turn of the wheel, every shadow in the mist, reminded him of her presence, lingering like a question with no answer. The warmth of the heater could not chase away the chill that seemed embedded in the memory of the passenger seat. For days afterward, he found himself glancing at mirrors, double-checking doors, half expecting her to appear again, silently asking for another ride. The Vanishing Hitchhiker is more than a simple ghost story. It plays on something deeply human, the fear of the unknown, the unease of encountering someone who should not be there, and the lingering sorrow of lives cut short. Each retelling keeps the legend alive, a story that warns drivers to be vigilant, yet entices with the thrill of the unexplained. There is a universal fascination with the encounter, the mixture of fear, curiosity, and empathy for a spirit caught in the world of the living, seeking a home she will never reach. And so, the story continues. Foggy roads, lonely highways, and quiet nights hold the memory of the vanishing hitchhiker. Those who see her may never understand what they witnessed, yet the encounter leaves an indelible mark, a reminder that the past can reach into the present, that the living and the dead share more than just a road, and that sometimes a simple act of kindness, stopping to offer a ride, can bring you face to face with the inexplicable, the tragic, and the terrifying. It was a warm summer night, the kind where the air is thick with humidity and the scent of pine and grass lingers in the breeze. A group of teenagers, two couples, had driven out to a quiet, secluded spot just outside of town. A place locals whispered about, but few dared to go alone. Known simply as Lover's Lane, the dirt road wound between tall trees, the headlights of their cars cutting through the darkness. The night was meant for laughter, soft music, and stolen moments, but it quickly became a lesson in fear that none of them would ever forget. As the car's engine idled, the teens chatted and teased each other, nervously aware of the isolation around them. One of the girls, Sarah, picked up the radio dial to find a station playing a soft summer hit. But suddenly, the broadcast was interrupted by an emergency alert. The announcer's voice was grim, crackling over the static. "Attention all residents, an escaped killer is on the loose. Reports say the suspect has a hook for a hand. If you see anything suspicious, call authorities immediately." The four teens laughed nervously at first, trying to dismiss the announcement. "It's probably just another urban legend," said Mike, grinning. though the edge in his voice betrayed a hint of nervousness. "Remember that story about the hook-handed man? People have been scaring teenagers with that for decades. It's just a story." They laughed it off and returned to their chatter, but an uneasy feeling settled over them. The dark woods around their car seemed to grow closer, more oppressive, as if the trees themselves were watching. The only sound beyond the radio was the soft rustle of leaves and the distant croak of a frog somewhere in the shadows. Then came the first sound that made them freeze, a faint scratching noise against the side of the car, so subtle they almost convinced themselves it was the wind or a branch brushing against the metal. But the sound persisted, a deliberate, irregular scratching, moving along the driver's side door. Heartbeats quickened. They all went silent, straining to listen. "It's probably just a raccoon or something," Sarah whispered, though her voice was tight with fear. "Yeah, a raccoon with a hook," Mike muttered, half joking, half terrified. The others didn't laugh. The scratching grew louder, closer. It seemed to move in rhythm, tracing the outline of the car door, pausing for a moment, then resuming with a deliberate, sinister pattern. The teens exchanged nervous glances, the kind that speak volumes without words. What had started as a fun night out was suddenly steeped in tension. Every creak of the car, every shadow outside the windows, magnified by fear. Mike reached for the door handle, trying to rationalize what was happening, but just as he touched it, a louder, more violent scratching erupted, sounding almost like claws against metal. Sarah let out a squeal, and the others bolted into the back seat, adrenaline surging. The car was stationary, but their minds raced with the stories they had all heard, though the hook-handed killer who lurked in the darkness, striking at unsuspecting teens, parked at Lover's Lane. The radio crackled again, this time repeating the warning. "The suspect is dangerous. If you are in an isolated area, remain in your vehicle and call the authorities immediately." The static seemed to underscore the scratching, amplifying their terror. Every instinct screamed at them to leave, but fear held them frozen in place, their minds running through the countless variations of the legend that had haunted generations. Then came the sound that shattered their tentative courage, a metallic scrape along the roof of the car, accompanied by a low, deliberate rasping noise, almost like a voice whispering their names. The 4 teens clung to each other, frozen in horror. The urban legend they had dismissed as childish pranks, as simple storytelling, was now surrounding them with an intensity that felt terrifyingly real. Sarah managed to fumble with her phone, dialing 911. Her hands shaking so violently, she struggled to keep the line open. The dispatcher's calm voice barely cut through the pounding of her heartbeat and the incessant scratching outside. "Stay in the vehicle. Don't get out. Help is on the way." Minutes stretched into eternity, the sound of scratching now accompanied by faint thuds against the hood and windows. Shadows seemed to shift outside, elongated and unnatural in the weak light of the car's interior. Every instinct in their bodies screamed that the legend had become reality, that the hook-handed killer was nearby, waiting for the slightest opportunity to strike. Eventually, headlights appeared in the distance, growing brighter, accompanied by the wail of a siren. Police had arrived, and the scratching ceased abruptly, as if the entity lurking in the shadows knew it had been spotted. Officers surrounded the car, weapons drawn, checking the perimeter and calling out for anyone hiding in the trees or underbrush. But there was nothing. No sign of a person, no tracks, no footprints in the soft dirt, just the lingering sense of menace that had gripped the teens moments before. The legend of the hook-handed killer continues to haunt Lover's Lane, whispered in the same anxious tones at sleepovers and campfires across the country. Drivers are warned to be vigilant. Teenagers are dared to park and test their courage, and countless retellings ensure the story survives, a reminder that danger can lurk in the most unexpected places. The scratching on the car door is more than a story. It is a manifestation of fear itself, a thrill born from the human imagination, but rooted in our instinctive terror of being alone, isolated, and vulnerable. Even today, on foggy summer nights, teenagers still drive to Lover's Lane, daring each other to park and wait, hearts pounding, hoping the legend remains just a story. But for those who have heard the scratching, felt the cold dread, and glimpsed shadows that move against the light. The hook is never far from their minds. It is a tale that will never truly leave, because fear, once planted, grows in the dark and waits patiently to be remembered. Late at night, when the house was silent and shadows stretched across the walls, young Lisa lay in her bedroom, clutching her favorite blanket. The night seemed darker than usual, the kind of darkness that presses against the windows and seeps into your bones. Her parents had gone out for a late dinner, leaving her alone in the house, with only the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the old wooden floors for company. But she wasn't entirely alone. Beneath her bed, where the darkness pooled like ink, she felt a familiar comfort. Her small, loyal dog, Max, always slept there. The thought made her heart a little lighter. Whenever she felt scared, she would reach under the bed, and Max would respond with a soft, reassuring lick of his tongue on her hand. The sound of his tail thumping against the floor was like a steady heartbeat, grounding her in safety. Tonight, with the wind rattling the windows and shadows dancing across the walls, she needed that reassurance more than ever. As she lay on her bed, shivering slightly under her blanket, Lisa extended her hand into the darkness beneath her bed. The familiar wet warmth of Max's tongue greeted her, and she giggled nervously. "It's okay, Max," she whispered, feeling a little braver. "I'm not scared when you're here." The dog's licks continued, methodical and soothing, and slowly her fears began to melt away. Hours passed, the sound of the house settling, the occasional creak of the attic, all faded into a background hum as Lisa drifted in and out of sleep. Every so often, she would feel Max's gentle licks and drift back to a sense of security. That night, in the comforting presence of her dog, the darkness didn't seem so frightening. Morning arrived quietly, with a pale light filtering through the curtains. Lisa stretched and yawned, expecting the usual sight of Max curled up under the bed. She reached down, smiling, but her hand met empty space. Confused, she leaned closer, calling softly, "Max." The silence that answered her was heavy and unsettling. A sense of dread began to creep over her as she looked under the bed more carefully. At first, she thought she was imagining things, that Max had just wandered off in the night. But then she saw him. Max was hanging from the ceiling of her closet, his body stiff, his eyes wide and lifeless. Panic gripped her chest, making it hard to breathe. Her small hands shook violently as she tried to pull him down, but it was too late. As if that horrific sight wasn't enough, her gaze was drawn to something written on the wall above Max, scrawled in what could only be blood. The letters were jagged, uneven, but unmistakable. "Humans can lick too." Lisa stumbled backward, tripping over her blanket, her mind refusing to comprehend what she was seeing. Her dog, the source of comfort and love in her life, was gone, replaced by a message that chilled her to the core. Her heart pounded in her chest as a scream built in her throat, but no sound came out. Her room, once a safe haven, now felt like a trap. The hours that followed were a blur. She ran to the phone, dialing her parents, only to have the line crackle and go dead. The front door, usually unlocked, wouldn't budge when she tried to push it open. Windows that she knew she had left slightly open were now firmly shut. The house seemed alive, watching her, waiting. Fear turned into terror as the realization settled in. Someone or something had been in the house while she slept. Someone who had taken Max and left a warning, a perverse, twisted reminder that the trust she had placed in her companion had been violated in the most horrific way possible. The words on the wall, smeared in blood, echoed in her mind with every heartbeat. "Humans can lick too." Even now, decades later, the story of Lisa and Max is whispered among those who dare talk about it. People warn their children never to take comfort in the familiar, to never assume that safety is guaranteed just because it's been there before. The licked hand, as it came to be known, is a story of trust turned into terror, of innocence confronted by unspeakable horror. Psychologists later speculated about the trauma Lisa endured, about the nightmare that unfolded in that small bedroom. They spoke of the primal fear of betrayal, of the horror of realizing that someone or something could imitate the love and comfort of a beloved companion only to destroy it. They spoke in clinical terms, but the essence of the story defies reason. The memory of Max, the warmth of his tongue, and the unspeakable message on the wall lingered in Lisa's mind, an eternal reminder that not all trust is safe. Neighbors said they had heard nothing, that the house seemed quiet, ordinary, as if nothing had happened. Yet the rumors persisted, growing more sinister with every retelling. Children in the neighborhood began to dare each other to touch the dark spaces beneath their beds, but few ever went through with it. The house at the end of the street, once a place of normalcy, became a monument to fear. Lisa never returned to her room, but she never forgot. At night, when the house settled into silence, she would sometimes imagine the familiar sensation of Max licking her hand, and every time, a shiver ran down her spine as the words came unbidden to her mind. Humans can lick too. It's a story that has haunted generations, a chilling reminder that the boundaries between comfort and terror are thinner than we like to think. That which is meant to soothe can also deceive. That which we trust most can become the instrument of our deepest fear. And in the darkness, under the bed, the line between safety and horror may vanish entirely, leaving nothing but a cold, lingering dread. Beneath the bustling streets of any major city, a hidden world exists, dark, damp, and crawling with secrets. It is a place most people never think about, unless they hear an unusual splash in the distance or a strange echo in the subway tunnels. For decades, rumors have swirled about giant alligators living in these underground labyrinths, feeding on rats, sewage, and anything unlucky enough to wander too close. The stories sound absurd at first, a product of overactive imaginations, urban legend, and late-night tabloid headlines, but the terror they inspire is real. It all begins with the sewer system itself. Vast tunnels stretch for miles under concrete and asphalt, a network of pipes and channels designed to carry water, waste, and storm runoff safely away from the surface. They are dark, often ankle-deep or waist-deep in murky water, with a pungent smell that clings to clothing and skin. Occasionally, maintenance crews hear things that unsettle even the most hardened workers: loud splashes, the feeling of unseen eyes watching, and in some cases, unmistakable sounds of movement too large to belong to rats or stray cats. The most persistent tales are of albino alligators, enormous and nearly ghostly in appearance. People who claim to have seen them describe creatures 10, 12, sometimes 15 feet long, with pale, almost translucent skin and eyes that seem to glow faintly in the darkness. According to the stories, these monsters were once ordinary pet alligators, flushed down toilets decades ago by owners who could no longer care for them. Surviving in the sewers, away from sunlight and predators, these alligators grew to unnatural sizes, thriving in a world of constant darkness, abundant food, and complete anonymity. Urban legends tell of janitors and city workers who have glimpsed movement in the shadows and felt an overwhelming sense of being watched. One story describes a young maintenance worker in New York City who was checking a manhole after a storm. As he leaned over to inspect the rushing water, he felt a sudden, powerful tug at his boots. He managed to pull himself back, heart pounding, only to see a massive shape slip into the murky water, leaving waves radiating across the surface. He never reported the incident officially, fearing ridicule, but he never set foot in a sewer again without a partner. In other accounts, rat infestations mysteriously vanish overnight, and strange, large footprints are found in wet concrete near manholes or maintenance tunnels. The footprints are oval, elongated, and measure almost 2 feet in length, with clawed impressions that suggest a creature much larger than a typical urban predator. Witnesses report hearing hissing and low growls echoing through the tunnels, sounds that cannot be traced to anything else, and sometimes a faint, sickly sweet odor that hints at decay or worse. Some researchers claim the stories are exaggerated, products of mass hysteria and folklore. But evidence is scarce precisely because these creatures, if they exist, are perfectly adapted to avoid humans. They are nocturnal, reclusive, and enormous, making them difficult to catch or photograph. Occasionally, pest control teams capture smaller alligators flushed from private sewer lines. But these pale in comparison to the legends, leaving the imagination to fill in the blanks. The fear persists, stronger than any documented fact. Children grow up hearing the warnings: never flush a live animal, never wander near open manholes at night, and never, under any circumstance, stick your hands into murky water without knowing what lurks beneath. Teenagers dare each other to drop objects into the water, daring to provoke a splash or a strike from something unseen. Adults avoid maintenance work at night alone, citing inexplicable sounds, strange echoes, and the stories that refuse to die. The most terrifying accounts are the ones that cannot be disproven. A janitor in Chicago once claimed he saw an albino alligator rise from a flooded tunnel, its body glistening under the weak emergency lights, jaws snapping inches from his boots. In Detroit, a city worker said he felt something massive brush against his leg while inspecting a sewer shaft, only to hear it vanish into the rushing water before he could react. These are isolated incidents, often dismissed as hallucinations, exaggerations, or coincidence, but for those who experience them, the memory is vivid and permanent. Even city planners and engineers, those who spend their lives designing these networks, cannot completely quell the fear. They know the tunnels are home to rats, raccoons, and other urban wildlife. They know the water is dangerous and contaminated, but the idea of a giant predator lying unseen beneath the streets taps into something far older than modern cities: the primal fear of being hunted by something lurking in the dark. Albino alligators in the sewers may be impossible to prove, but the stories endure because they play on a universal fear. That danger can exist where we feel safest. The streets above are busy, crowded, familiar, but beneath them lies a hidden world that obeys its own rules. In the darkness, the usual order of life can be reversed. Prey can become predator, and the things we flush away or ignore might come back to haunt us in ways we cannot predict. In recent years, urban explorers and YouTube enthusiasts have ventured into tunnels armed with cameras, flashlights, and microphones. Some claim to have caught glimpses of enormous shapes moving through the water, or sounds too heavy, too deliberate, to belong to any known animal. Footage is grainy, audio distorted, but it fuels the stories further, adding modern proof to ancient fear. The narrative continues to grow, passed from city to city, generation to generation. The alligators in the sewers may be myth, truth, or a frightening combination of both. It is the uncertainty that makes the legend so effective. Every splash in the night, every echo from the underground, every strange ripple in murky water could be nothing, or it could be a creature the size of a small boat, gliding silently beneath our feet, waiting, watching, and surviving in the dark. For decades, urban dwellers have lived with this thought: beneath the streets, where no sunlight penetrates and no one goes alone, a predator might be waiting. It might be albino, it might be enormous, and it might remember the humans who once flushed it away. The fear is a part of city life now, a reminder that the familiar world above ground is only one layer of reality. Below, in the tunnels, in the dark water, the alligators waytand. The unknown is always terrifying. It was a quiet evening in a sleepy suburban neighborhood, the kind of night where the air feels thick with stillness, and the faint hum of distant traffic is the only sound. Most residents were settling in for the night, doors locked, lights dimmed, and televisions flickering quietly. Yet in the shadows along the streets, a different kind of story was unfolding, one that had haunted towns across America for decades. The legend was simple, yet terrifying. Children with entirely black eyes, knocking on doors, asking to be let in. They looked like ordinary children at first glance, pale faces, unremarkable clothing, small hands that barely reached a doorknob, but something about them was immediately, deeply wrong. Their eyes were the first giveaway, smooth and void-like, reflecting nothing, absorbing everything. People who encountered them describe an intense sense of dread, an instinctual fear that runs deeper than reason or logic. The first story that brought the phenomenon to national attention occurred in the mid-1990s. A man living alone in a small town reported a late-night knock at his door. When he opened it, two children stood there, boy and a girl, no older than 10 or 11. Their eyes were jet black, devoid of any whites, pupils, or irises. They spoke in unison, soft and strangely formal, asking if they could come inside. He remembered feeling a sudden, suffocating fear, a sensation that made his chest tighten and his limbs heavy. Despite their polite words, their presence felt invasive, unnatural. The man refused, and the children merely nodded, smiling faintly, before disappearing into the night. He locked the door, trembling, unable to shake the memory of their gaze. The encounter left him shaken for months, unable to sleep with the lights off, certain that the black-eyed children could return at any moment. His story, when shared online years later, ignited countless reports from across the country, stories that were eerily similar, all involving children who should have been familiar and safe, yet radiated a profound sense of malevolence. Witnesses often described the children as persistent, sometimes lingering for hours outside homes, waiting for permission to enter. They rarely reveal their origins or intentions, and any attempt to engage them in conversation is met with a monotone politeness that feels rehearsed, unnatural. Even when rejected, they do not argue or cry, but an aura of threat seems to cling to them, an almost tangible pressure that makes the air feel heavier, colder. People report that the longer they look into the children's eyes, the more overwhelming the sense of dread becomes, as if reality itself is being warped. Some accounts are more sinister. A couple in Texas recalled the night when two black-eyed children appeared at their back door, insisting they had lost their way. The couple attempted to close the door, but found themselves frozen, unable to move, as the children's gaze held them. Only after mustering all their strength were they able to pull the door shut. When they looked outside again, the children had vanished, leaving no footprints, no traces, only the lingering feeling that something had almost entered their home, something that did not belong. Psychologists and skeptics argue that these stories are products of fear, stress, or hallucinations, but the consistency of the reports across decades and states, combined with the undeniable terror described, makes the phenomenon difficult to dismiss entirely. Whether supernatural or psychological, the encounters tap into a universal fear, the innocence of childhood twisted into something predatory, a reminder that danger can appear in forms we instinctively trust. The black-eyed children rarely act aggressively in the conventional sense. They do not attack, steal, or break things. Instead, their threat is more insidious, psychological, and primal. People describe feeling an irresistible compulsion to allow them inside, as if saying no is impossible, as if defying them could carry consequences beyond mere disappointment. The children's presence alone, coupled with the unnatural depths of their eyes, creates a fear that is both immediate and lingering. For many, the encounters end once the children leave. Others report strange events following a visit, cold spots in rooms where they lingered, fleeting shadows in peripheral vision, whispers in empty hallways, and an ever-present feeling of being watched. It is as if their intrusion into the home leaves a mark, a residual aura of unease that refuses to dissipate. The most unsettling aspect of all is that no one has ever been able to identify the children, nor has anyone seen them during the day. They only appear at night, under cover of darkness, when the boundary between safety and vulnerability is thinnest. Urban legends have grown around them, linking their appearances to impending danger, death, or misfortune. Some believe they are omens, heralds of darker forces seeking entry into our world. Others argue they are lost souls, trapped between realities, appearing to humans as children to evoke compassion before revealing their true nature. Regardless of interpretation, the stories continue to inspire fear, whispered late at night by parents warning their children, by adults recalling their own encounters, and by online forums dedicated to strange and unexplained phenomena. The most terrifying part of the black-eyed children is not their appearance or their persistence, but the uncertainty they carry. They are unpredictable, silent in motive, and deeply alien in their demeanor. They turn familiar spaces, homes, porches, and hallways into places of unease where trust cannot be taken for granted. To see them is to confront a profound dissonance, innocence twisted into something threatening. The normal rules of reality undermined, a reminder that danger often wears a face we least suspect. People who claim to have encountered black-eyed children describe the aftermath as lasting far beyond the night. Sleep is difficult, and shadows in the corners of rooms seem alive. The mundane sounds of a house creaking floors, dripping faucets, humming appliances suddenly take on ominous meaning. Many refuse to talk about their experiences, afraid of disbelief or ridicule, but the memories remain vivid and inescapable. Despite skepticism, the legend persists. Across America, doors are locked a little more securely. Porch lights burn a little brighter, and parents warn their children not to answer the door to strangers, especially at night. The black-eyed children may not be proven, but their impact is undeniable, a testament to the power of fear rooted in something both familiar and profoundly alien. In the quiet darkness of a suburban street, when the world seems calm and safe, the possibility lingers: a knock on the door, a faint voice asking to be let in, and eyes that hold no light, no mercy, only a silent, patient, and inescapable menace. The black-eyed children wait just beyond the threshold, and the world above is none the wiser. The night was dark, quiet, and unusually still. The kind of stillness that made every creak of a house feel louder, every shadow deeper. For 19-year-old Emily, babysitting was supposed to be a simple job. Nothing more than keeping the children entertained and ensuring they didn't get into trouble while their parents went out for the evening. She had done it many times before, but nothing in her experience had prepared her for what she would encounter that night. The house seemed normal enough when she arrived, a 2-story suburban home with white siding, trimmed hedges, and a garage filled with bicycles and toys. The parents were friendly, polite, and casual as they explained the rules. "Dinner is on the counter," they said. "Lights out by 8:30 for the kids. Oh, and Emily," the father added, his voice lowering slightly, "just don't mind the clown statue in the corner of the living room. It's kind of creepy. If it bothers you, feel free to cover it with a sheet." Emily smiled politely, nodding. She had seen clowns in circuses, on television, even in toy stores. And while they always made her a little uneasy, she was confident she could handle a harmless decorative statue. She didn't expect it to matter much, tucked into the corner of the room where the children played. The parents left, and the door clicked shut behind them, leaving Emily alone with the 2 children and the quiet hum of the house. After helping the kids with homework and preparing a simple snack, Emily turned her attention to the living room, where the clown statue sat. She studied it for a moment, tall, dressed in bright colors, with painted-on smiles and wide staring eyes. It was unsettling, yes, but mostly static and obviously inanimate. Still, she remembered the parents' warning. With a shrug, she retrieved a light sheet from the linen closet and draped it carefully over the figure. That should be the end of it, she thought. Out of sight, out of mind. The evening passed without incident. The children went to bed on schedule, and Emily settled in the living room with a book, enjoying the quiet. The house seemed peaceful, almost too peaceful, as if it were holding its breath. Then she heard a sound, soft, deliberate, almost imperceptible. At first, she thought it was the house settling, a creak from the old floorboards, but the sound repeated, more insistent this time. A faint shuffle, coming from the direction of the living room. Her stomach tightened. She told herself it was nothing, probably the wind, rattling a window or a branch against the siding. But instinctively, she looked toward the corner, toward the sheet-covered figure. Her heart skipped a beat. The outline under the sheet seemed taller, broader, more imposing than it had before. For a brief moment, she froze, unable to breathe, unable to move. The sheet rustled lightly, as if something beneath it had shifted. Panic set in. Emily's mind raced with every story she had ever heard about intruders, home invasions, and strange happenings. She tried to rationalize it. Maybe a raccoon had gotten inside. Maybe one of the children had climbed back downstairs for a snack. But the idea was absurd. The doors were locked, the windows secure, and the sound of footsteps didn't match the tiny feet of the kids upstairs. Gathering her courage, she approached the figure slowly, every instinct screaming for her to run. With trembling hands, she yanked the sheet away, froze. The clown statue was gone. In its place, a man crouched low in the corner, dressed in a garish clown outfit. Painted smiles stretched unnaturally across his face, eyes cold and calculating. He was larger than any human should be in that cramped space, and the grin that was supposed to be friendly radiated malice. Emily stumbled back, tripping over the edge of the carpet. She scrambled to the phone, hands shaking, dialing 911, her voice barely audible as she whispered for help. The man moved slowly, deliberately, emerging from the shadows, his eyes fixed on her. Every instinct screamed that she needed to escape, to get out of the house immediately. She bolted for the door, fumbling with the lock, her heart pounding in her chest. The operator's voice crackled over the line, calm and steady, guiding her through the panic. "Stay on the line, ma'am. Police are on their way. Do not confront him." Emily backed into the kitchen, keeping the phone pressed to her ear. As the intruder followed, moving almost silently, despite his size, her mind raced with questions. How had he gotten in? How long had he been there? And why had the parents warned her about a statue that wasn't even a statue at all? A sudden noise from upstairs, probably the children, distracted the man, giving Emily the moment she needed. She dashed out the back door into the cool night air, leaving the phone inside, still connected to the operator. She ran down the driveway, calling for help, screaming for anyone to hear her. In the distance, she saw headlights approaching. Neighbors, alerted by the commotion and relief, washed over her. The police arrived moments later, apprehending the man before he could flee. Later, Emily learned a terrifying truth. The clown figure had never been a statue. It had been the intruder, hiding in plain sight, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal himself. The parents' warning had been their only hope of protecting her indirectly. They had left her with the means to avoid direct confrontation, assuming she would heed the advice. The man had a history of home invasions, often targeting babysitters, using disguises to blend into the familiar environment of a home. The story of the clown statue became one of those urban legends whispered among teenagers and young babysitters for decades. It taps into a fear that is both specific and universal. The fear of clowns, the fear of the familiar turning sinister, and the realization that danger can be closer than it seems. People have since claimed to hear similar stories: the unexpected, the out of place, the seemingly harmless object that hides a terrifying truth. For Emily, the memory never fades. Every time she sees a clown, whether at a carnival, in a store, or on a television screen, she recalls that night, the darkness, the rustling of the sheet, and the chilling grin that had almost been her last sight. The story serves as a warning, a chilling reminder that what we take for granted in our own homes can sometimes conceal the unimaginable. Babysitters everywhere still hear about the clown statue. Some laugh it off, thinking it a harmless tale to scare newcomers. But the story persists because of its realism, its quiet terror, and its truth. The threat is sometimes closer than you realize, hiding in plain sight, waiting for the moment you least expect. And in the silence of an ordinary home, a harmless decoration might be far from harmless at all. In cities and suburbs across America, there exists a story whispered in the dark, a tale told in the shadows of bathrooms and bedrooms. It is a story that has persisted for decades, crossing generations, fueled by curiosity, fear, and the thrill of testing the boundaries of reality. The legend is simple. Say the name Candyman 5 times into a mirror, and he will appear. But this is not just a harmless game. Candyman is said to be a vengeful spirit, a man with a hook for a hand, and a presence that leaves more than fear in its wake. The origins of the legend are murky, blending folklore with urban horror. Some say Candyman was a man wronged, betrayed, or murdered, returning from the grave to exact revenge on the curious and the careless. Others suggest he is a cautionary tale, a psychological imprint warning against curiosity and hubris. Over the years, the story has evolved, enriched by countless Some versions claim he haunts abandoned buildings or dark alleyways, while the most pervasive iteration involves mirrors, the reflection of the self, and the act of summoning. It begins with a mirror. Any mirror will do. A bathroom mirror, a vanity mirror, a large hall mirror. The ritual requires saying his name aloud, exactly 5 times, facing the reflection. The first utterance is often met with hesitation, a quiet chuckle of disbelief. The second and third are more deliberate, tinged with tension, a creeping awareness of what might follow. By the fourth, an uncomfortable pressure begins to build, a sensation that the air has grown colder, heavier, and the reflection in the glass is somehow different. The fifth and final utterance is where the danger begins. Stories abound of people who tried, motivated by dares or sheer curiosity. One teenager, alone in her bathroom, whispered his name 5 times, each repetition shaking her voice more than the last. At first, nothing happened, and she laughed at herself for being so easily frightened. But then she saw it, a shadowed figure in the mirror, taller than her reflection, with eyes that seemed to pierce the glass itself. She froze, unable to speak or look away. The figure raised a hand, its hook glinting in the dim light. That was the last thing she saw before it vanished, leaving her trembling. Certain she had glimpsed something impossible and malevolent. Candyman is not always immediately visible. Sometimes he manifests as fleeting reflections in mirrors, dark flashes in peripheral vision, or the faint, echoing sound of a hook scraping against metal. Some who have attempted the ritual report feeling an oppressive presence in the room afterward, as though the spirit lingers even without physical form. Doors that were closed suddenly creak open, lights flicker, shadows stretch unnaturally. A subtle chill permeates the air, and the ordinary world feels slightly off-kilter, as if reality itself has been touched by something inhuman. The hook is Candyman's signature and his instrument of terror. In legend, it was used to commit violent acts, a mark of his wrath. In modern retellings, the hook is more symbolic, a reminder that curiosity can leave one vulnerable to forces beyond comprehension. Some stories recount injuries inflicted on the careless, scratches, or deeper wounds appearing mysteriously, always consistent with the image of a hook. Others describe psychological scars, nightmares, obsessive fear of mirrors, and an unshakable sense of being watched. There are rules, whispered alongside the tale, designed to prevent the ritual from summoning Candyman. Do not look behind you. Do not repeat the name more than 5 times. Do not summon him in anger or jest. And if you sense his presence, do not flee in panic. Do not run in the dark. And most importantly, do not doubt that he is there. The rules are inconsistent, shifting with each retelling, and that is part of the terror. The uncertainty, the lack of control, and the idea that breaking one small boundary could unleash a malevolent force. Psychologists suggest that the legend persists because it taps into primal fears, the fear of mirrors, which reflect both ourselves and the unknown, the fear of being watched, and the fear of summoning something beyond our control. Yet many who have experienced Candyman insist it is more than a psychological phenomenon. They describe the weight of his presence, the sensation of an unseen hand brushing against them, and a terror that lingers long after the story is told. It is a fear that cannot be rationalized, that leaves a mark in the mind, a shadow that remains even in well-lit rooms. Some encounters are more extreme. Urban explorers report entering abandoned buildings to find mirrors smeared with handprints, often accompanied by faint scratches or graffiti referencing Candyman. A small group of college students once dared to perform the ritual in a dorm bathroom. Within minutes, all 5 reported seeing the hook-handed figure in fleeting reflections, and one later claimed a scratch on her arm had appeared overnight, shaped like a crescent hook. Whether coincidence, mass hysteria, or supernatural intervention, the story circulated widely, reinforcing the legend. Candyman's terror is subtle, yet enduring. He does not strike immediately. He works psychologically, creating tension, doubt, and fear. Even those who hear the story but never attempt a ritual may feel unease when passing a mirror in a dark hallway or locking eyes with their reflection in low light. The story becomes self-perpetuating, carried by whispers, dares, and the thrill of testing courage against legend. Ultimately, Candyman is more than a tale of horror. He is a symbol. He represents the danger of curiosity, the boundary between known and unknown, and the enduring power of folklore to shape our perception of reality. Mirrors, once mundane objects, become thresholds to fear. Saying a name 5 times transforms a quiet night into a landscape of terror. And even if Candyman is never truly summoned, the psychological mark he leaves is undeniably lingering sense that in the reflection, something may be waiting. Route 66, America's iconic highway, stretches across deserts, plains, and forgotten towns. A ribbon of asphalt that has witnessed the rise and fall of the open road. Travelers on this historic route speak of motels, diners, and neon signs that flicker like ghosts themselves. But some of the stories are far more literal. Among the tales whispered in motels and roadside bars, none is as chilling or as enduring as the story of the ghostly hitchhiker. Drivers along stretches of Route 66 often report encounters with a lone figure standing by the roadside. She is usually young, dressed in clothing that seems slightly outdated, as if she has stepped out of another era. Her appearance is unremarkable, at first glance just a traveler seeking help, but there is an aura about her that unsettles those who stop. She does not smile, she does not chatter, she merely stands, silent and still, waiting. The legend varies from town to town. Some say she was a young woman, killed in a car accident on the highway decades ago, forever bound to the road where her life ended. Others suggest she is the spirit of someone lost during the Dust Bowl, searching endlessly for a home that no longer exists. The truth is unknown, and that uncertainty is part of the fear. People driving alone on long stretches of desert highway have claimed to see her materialize in the distance. Motionless, her thumb extended in the universal gesture of a hitchhiker, the encounters almost always follow the same pattern. A driver, usually traveling late at night, when the road is quiet, spots a figure on the shoulder. They pull over, feeling a mixture of obligation and unease. The woman climbs into the car without a word, and for a few moments, the journey is uneventful. But as the miles pass, the driver senses something wrong. Perhaps the rearview mirror shows her eyes staring straight ahead, unblinking, or maybe the temperature in the car drops suddenly, the air thick and heavy. The presence is quiet, yet oppressive, and the instinctive sense that something is unnatural begins to creep in. It is only when the driver reaches the location the woman requests a door, when curiosity leads them to glance at the back seat, that the horror becomes undeniable. In almost every report, the passenger has vanished. Some witnesses describe looking away for a moment, checking the map, or adjusting the radio, only to turn and find the seat empty. No door has been opened, no sound has accompanied her disappearance, and the car remains locked. The spot where she sat is cold, as if the air itself remembers her presence. In many versions of the story, a faint scent lingers, a hint of perfume, dust, or something indescribably old. Some encounters go further. Drivers describe glimpses of the woman in mirrors long after the ride should have ended, a fleeting image in passing headlights or reflecting from a diner window. Others have reported hearing whispered words, soft and sorrowful, coming from empty seats or the rear of the car. Panic sets in, but when they stop the vehicle to investigate, nothing remains. The highway is empty, stretching endlessly into the night, silent except for the hum of tires on asphalt. Local lore suggests that helping the hitchhiker is not enough. She cannot leave until her unfinished business is addressed, though what that entails is never made clear. Some theories say she is searching for someone she loved, someone who abandoned her on the road. Others suggest she is bound to the highway itself, trapped between time and space, doomed to repeat the final moments of her life endlessly. Whatever the truth, those who have encountered her speak of a lingering unease, a sense that the line between the living and the dead is thinner than it seems, especially on a road as storied and lonely as Route 66. The legend has grown over the years, fueled by newspaper clippings, online forums, and roadside conversations. Some claim to have seen her vanish into thin air just as they reached the next town. Others describe vehicles behaving strangely during the encounter, radio static, engine stalls, headlights flickering, events that vanish once the apparition is gone. The stories persist because they are not confined to one place or time. From Illinois to California, travelers report similar experiences, all tied to the same desolate stretches of the highway, all describing the same quiet, sorrowful figure. Psychologists suggest the stories endure because they tap into primal fears, being alone in the dark, the vulnerability of strangers, and the disquieting idea that something familiar, someone who asks for help, could be a harbinger of danger. Yet the ghostly hitchhiker transcends rational explanation. The encounters leave a lasting psychological mark, creating a sense of unease that lingers long after the trip is over. Even drivers who have never seen her speak of the legend with a shiver, treating empty stretches of road with caution and respect. The most chilling accounts are from those who have driven the highway at night, alone, miles from the nearest town. A man traveling from Arizona to New Mexico reported picking up a young woman who asked to be taken to a town that no longer existed. He drove for what felt like hours, glancing in the rearview mirror, noticing her eyes dark and unblinking. When he finally stopped at the site she had requested, he turned to speak to her and found the seat empty. To this day, he claims he feels her presence in his peripheral vision whenever he drives long roads alone. Some travelers have tried to document the phenomenon, photographing the rear seat or recording the road behind them, hoping to capture evidence. In most cases, the results are inconclusive: shadows, blurs, fleeting shapes that vanish upon closer inspection. But for those who have experienced it firsthand, proof is unnecessary. The fear is real, and the memory is permanent. The ghostly hitchhiker of Route 66 is not a story easily forgotten. She lives in the mind long after the highway stretches behind the headlights. The legend continues to inspire, caution, and terrify. Route 66, once a symbol of freedom and adventure, carries with it the weight of history, tragedy, and the supernatural. Those who travel it at night know that the highway is more than asphalt and signs. Somewhere between the towns, in the stretches of desert and quiet pavement, a figure waits, thumb extended, silently asking for a ride. And for those who stop, the encounter may change them forever, leaving a mark of unease and the unnerving knowledge that some travelers never truly leave the road. Deep in the dense, shadowed forests of the New Jersey Pine Barrens, a legend has endured for centuries, a creature whispered about in hushed tones by locals and feared by all who live nearby. Known simply as the Jersey Devil, it is described as a winged hooved entity with a terrifying presence, its cries echoing through the night like nothing else in nature. Though many dismiss it as folklore, the stories persist, terrifying generations and leaving an indelible mark on the region. The origins of the Jersey Devil stretch back to the early 18th century. According to local legend, a woman named Mother Leeds gave birth to her 13th child in 1735. Cursed in frustration and anger, she declared that the child would be a devil. Accounts vary, but the child is said to have transformed before her very eyes, sprouting wings, hooves, a long pointed tail, and a face twisted in malice. From that moment, the creature vanished into the dense forests of the Pine Barrens, emerging occasionally to haunt the surrounding towns and farmlands. Residents of the Pine Barrens claim that sightings have been recorded for over 2 centuries. Farmers describe their livestock being found dead, sometimes mutilated, with deep, claw-like marks and punctures that defy explanation. The animals are left drained of blood in some reports, while others show signs of extreme terror, scattered across the fields as if a predator had stalked them silently in the night. Livestock are not the only victims. Many locals have reported seeing the creature itself. Descriptions are consistent across generations. Witnesses report a creature with leathery wings spanning several feet, a body covered in coarse hair, and hooves like a horse or goat. Its head is often said to resemble a horse or a bat, with glowing red or yellow eyes that pierce the darkness. The shrill, blood-curdling scream of the Jersey Devil is one of its most infamous features, a sound so high-pitched and inhuman that it has been known to terrify even the most seasoned hunters and outdoorsmen. Those who hear it describe an immediate sense of dread, a feeling that something otherworldly is nearby, watching, waiting. The 20th century brought a surge of reports that cemented the Jersey Devil's place in American folklore. In 1909, during what became known as the Jersey Devil Panic, hundreds of sightings were reported over a 2-week period. Residents claimed to see the creature gliding across rooftops, swooping through trees, and even chasing automobiles along the desolate stretches of the Pine Barrens. Telegraph offices, newspapers, and police stations were flooded with calls from terrified citizens. Flyers were printed, and hunting parties formed, though the creature always eluded capture. That panic only deepened the legend, making the Jersey Devil a household name in New Jersey and beyond. Encounters with the creature are not limited to visual sightings. Many people report hearing it first, an eerie, high-pitched scream echoing through the trees, followed by an unsettling silence. Hunters, hikers, and campers describe an oppressive feeling when in its presence, as if the air itself becomes heavy, carrying a warning not to linger. Some claim that dogs and other animals sense it as well, barking and growling at nothing visible, refusing to enter areas where the creature is said to roam. The psychological impact of the Jersey Devil cannot be overstated. For those who claim first-hand encounters, the memory lingers long after the forest falls silent. Many report nightmares, sudden unexplained chills, and a persistent feeling of being watched in remote areas. Even skeptics often admit to an uneasy sense when driving along lonely roads or walking through the thick pines at dusk. The legend has seeped into the culture of the region, becoming a symbol of fear, mystery, and the unknown lurking just beyond the edge of civilization. Modern sightings continue. In recent years, hikers and hunters have reported glimpses of a dark, winged figure moving unnaturally fast through the trees. Others describe strange footprints, hoofed and elongated, appearing in soft soil or snow, often near areas where sightings were reported the night before. Some have even reported hearing the shrill, unearthly scream in the dead of night, echoing across the Pine Barrens with no clear origin. Despite technological advances, cameras, and night vision equipment, the creature remains elusive, leaving only anecdotal evidence and an enduring fear. The Jersey Devil also exists in local culture, inspiring festivals, merchandise, and cryptozoological studies. But even as curiosity grows and the story gains commercial attention, the core of the legend remains terrifying. Unlike other myths, the Jersey Devil is said to be aggressive, intelligent, and capable of eluding detection. Its longevity, hundreds of years of reported encounters, adds to the aura of invincibility and menace. Unlike ghosts or spirits, it is described as a physical, corporeal being, with a presence that cannot be dismissed as mere imagination. Folklorists and cryptozoologists suggest several explanations: an undiscovered species, a mutated animal, or a psychological projection of fear within a dense, isolated environment. Others insist that the Jersey Devil is a supernatural being, a remnant of a curse, an entity that bridges the gap between the living world and something darker, rooted in the land itself. Regardless of explanation, the stories continue to grow, passed from generation to generation, fueled by eyewitness accounts, newspaper reports, and a sense of mystery that is impossible to fully explain. Travelers along the Pine Barrens are often warned to be cautious, especially at night. The roads wind through thick forests, where the trees block moonlight and the darkness is nearly absolute. Hikers are advised to stay on marked trails, and locals often recall childhood tales of the creature hiding in the underbrush, its wings beating silently, watching the unwary. Some say that hearing it scream is a warning, a message to leave immediately, while others claim it is a precursor to an attack. Though direct confrontations are exceedingly rare, for those who have seen it, the Jersey Devil is unforgettable. It embodies fear, isolation, and the unknown. Its screeching cries, glowing eyes, and inhuman form are not just stories, but experiences etched into the memories of those who have dared to venture into its territory. The Pine Barrens, with its dense pines, hidden hollows, and endless shadows, remains a perfect home for such a legend. A place where myths take root and thrive. To this day, the Jersey Devil continues to stalk the imaginations of New Jersey and beyond, a creature that refuses to fade into obscurity. Its presence in folklore, local culture, and the memories of those who claim to have encountered it ensures that the legend remains alive. Whether a physical being, a product of centuries-old fears, or a combination of both, the Jersey Devil persists as a symbol of terror, mystery, and the enduring power of the unknown. In the quiet depths of the Pine Barrens, where shadows stretch long and the wind whispers through the trees, one can almost hear the faint, chilling echo of a shrill scream carried across the forest. The Jersey Devil is still out there, waiting, watching, and reminding all who venture into its domain that some legends are more than just stories, they are living nightmares. In the tropical town of Key West, Florida, one of the most infamous legends of haunted objects resides quietly in a museum, yet its reputation casts a shadow far beyond its glass case. Robert the Doll is not just any toy. He is said to be cursed, a vessel of misfortune, capable of movement, mischief, and even malevolence. Visitors approach his display with a mixture of curiosity and trepidation, aware that Robert is far more than a simple child's plaything. The story of Robert begins in the early 1900s, when a young boy named Robert Eugene Otto received the doll as a gift. The origins of the doll are somewhat murky. Some accounts claim it was handcrafted by a local artisan, imbued with magical or supernatural properties. Others insist that it was an ordinary doll that somehow became extraordinary due to the boy's fascination and obsession. Regardless of its origins, the doll quickly became a fixture in the Otto household, earning the name Robert, or Robert the Doll, as the family would come to call him. What makes Robert infamous are the strange occurrences that followed. The Otto family reported hearing giggling and footsteps in the house when no one was present. Objects were found, moved, misplaced, or broken without explanation. Some claim that Robert's expression would change subtly, that his eyes would seem to follow visitors, or that his head would turn to face people when no one was touching him. While the Ottos may have initially dismissed these events as childhood imagination or coincidence, the phenomena persisted then. They were not limited to the family. Neighbors and visitors began reporting odd experiences as well. Guests in the Otto home claimed they felt an overwhelming sense of unease when Robert was nearby. Some said the doll whispered. Others swore they had seen him move from room to room when no one was looking. The most common warning was to never mock or disrespect him. Those who did laughing at his appearance, sneering at his posture, or speaking disparagingly found themselves subjected to unexplained misfortunes. Accidents, failed ventures, and personal tragedies were often attributed to Robert's wrath. Though skeptics insisted they were merely coincidences amplified by fear, Robert's notoriety grew over the decades. The Otto family eventually moved, and the doll was left behind. But even after leaving the house, Robert's legend did not fade. Stories circulated that attempts to rid oneself of the doll were met with resistance. Letters sent to Robert's new owners went unanswered, only to arrive weeks later, mysteriously returned, as if the doll itself had rejected the separation. Locals whispered that Robert had a consciousness of his own, a sentience fueled by the fear and respect of those around him. By the late 20th century, Robert the Doll had become a fixture in Key West folklore, drawing tourists, paranormal investigators, and thrill-seekers from across the country. He is now housed in the Fort East Martello Museum, behind glass. Yet, even in his display case, Robert continues to inspire fear. Visitors who fail to show proper respect by taking photographs without permission, mocking him, or leaving the room in laughter report strange events afterward. Cameras fail, electronics malfunction, and misfortunes of varying degrees are attributed to Robert's curse. To this day, a handwritten sign warns visitors to ask politely before taking photographs, a precaution meant to prevent invoking the doll's wrath. The reports are consistent. Tourists describe a sudden chill when approaching Robert, as if the air itself thickens with tension. Some swear they hear giggles echoing faintly in the museum halls. Others notice small movements, the slightest tilting of his head or repositioning of his hands, seemingly imperceptible but enough to make the observer's heart race. Perhaps most unsettling is the sense that Robert is watching, a silent sentinel capable of observing without moving, judging without words. Historians and paranormal experts have attempted to explain the phenomena scientifically, suggesting trick photography, human suggestion, or the natural creepiness of dolls as catalysts for fear. Yet those who have experienced Robert firsthand often insist that such rational explanations are insufficient. The misfortunes attributed to disrespecting him are too precise, too consistent across decades, and too frighteningly real for coincidence alone. He is more than a doll. He is a legend made tangible, an object that bridges the boundary between the living and the supernatural. Robert's reputation has influenced popular culture as well. He has been featured in books, television programs, and documentaries focused on haunted objects and paranormal activity. The stories of his anger, his mobility, and his alleged powers have been retold countless times, reinforcing his status as one of America's most notorious cursed artifacts. Yet despite this attention, no one has successfully tamed or truly understood Robert. He remains elusive, inscrutable, and undeniably menacing. For those who visit him today, Robert is a lesson in caution. Respect is paramount. A whispered greeting, a polite request for a photograph, or simply acknowledging his presence can prevent misfortune. Mockery or flippant behavior, however, is said to provoke his ire. Some skeptics leave the museum unshaken, shrugging off the warnings, only to later report a string of unusual events he's lost. Electronics failing, minor injuries at home that seem inexplicably tied to the encounter. The psychological effect of Robert alone is powerful. The fear he instills is enough to make a rational mind question reality. Over a century after his creation, Robert the doll continues to captivate and terrify. He is a symbol of childhood innocence, twisted into something uncanny, a reminder that even ordinary objects can harbor extraordinary forces. The legend endures because of its simplicity, a boy, a doll, and a curse that has survived generations. And the more people hear about him, the more they participate in the cycle, perpetuating the fear, the reverence, and the mystery. Robert is not just a story. He is an experience, one that continues to unfold in Key West, behind the glass of a museum display, yet reaching far beyond. Visitors leave with a shiver, a story to tell, and sometimes a lingering sense that they have not fully escaped his gaze. To disrespect Robert is to invite misfortune, but to acknowledge him with care is to witness one of the most enduring haunted legends of the modern era. Even today, the doll sits silently, a porcelain face frozen in a faint, enigmatic smile. But those who know the legend, those who have felt the weight of his stare or the chill in the air understand that Robert is never truly at rest. He watches, he waits, and the warning remains clear. Treat him with respect, or suffer the consequences. In the quiet town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, a legend has taken root that has haunted residents and intrigued outsiders for decades. The creature is known simply as Mothman, a humanoid figure with enormous wings and glowing red eyes. A being whose appearances are often said to foreshadow disaster. Its story is both terrifying and tragic, blending eyewitness accounts, folklore, and unexplained phenomena into one of America's most enduring cryptid legends. The first widely reported sightings of Mothman occurred in November 1966. Residents of Point Pleasant claimed to see a large, winged creature, sometimes described as 7 feet tall, perched silently on trees, power lines, or abandoned buildings. Its glowing red eyes struck fear into those who encountered it, appearing to watch without blinking, as if assessing the world with an intelligence beyond comprehension. Witnesses reported that Mothman moved with incredible speed and grace, flying silently or gliding effortlessly, leaving an eerie sense of unease in its wake. One of the most famous initial encounters involved a group of 5 men digging a grave in a cemetery late at night. They reported seeing a large creature with wings and red eyes standing nearby, its gaze fixed on them. The men fled in terror, recounting the story to the community, sparking a wave of sightings and local hysteria. Over the next several months, reports of Mothman multiplied. Residents driving at night claimed the creature would appear along roadways, sometimes crossing highways with unnatural speed, sometimes appearing near homes, always watched with those unnerving, glowing red eyes. As the sightings grew, so did speculation. Some believed Mothman to be an alien visitor, a harbinger from another world observing human activity. Others suggested a cryptid, a previously unknown species hidden in the forests and hills of West Virginia. Many locals, however, grew convinced that Mothman was a warning, a prophetic creature that appeared before calamity struck. This belief became tragically reinforced in December 1967, when the Silver Bridge, a major suspension bridge connecting Point Pleasant to Ohio, collapsed. 46 people died that day, and many residents recalled that Mothman sightings had preceded the disaster. The legend of the creature as an omen was born. Eyewitness descriptions vary, but several details remain consistent. Mothman is typically seen at night, often near abandoned or remote locations. Its wings are described as massive, sometimes spanning more than 10 feet, and its body as humanoid but covered in dark, shadowy feathers or fur. The most unnerving feature is consistently its eyes, glowing red, and seemingly intelligent. Witnesses often describe an overwhelming sense of dread in its presence, a psychic weight that suggests the creature is aware of more than just a physical world. Some claim to feel an inexplicable compulsion to flee or an instinctive warning that disaster is imminent. The Mothman sightings were meticulously documented in local newspapers, by law enforcement, and later, by paranormal investigators. Point Pleasant became a hub for cryptozoologists, paranormal enthusiasts, and thrill seekers, hoping to catch a glimpse of the creature. Books, articles, and documentaries chronicled the strange events of 1966 and 1967, cementing Mothman's place in American folklore. The creature's legend continues to inspire, influencing films, novels, and an annual festival in Point Pleasant, drawing visitors from across the country. Despite decades of investigation, Mothman remains unexplained. Skeptics propose a variety of possibilities. Misidentified birds, such as owls or herons, mass hysteria, or even elaborate hoaxes. Yet the consistency of the accounts, the widespread geographic and temporal range of sightings, and the creature's association with disaster make simple explanations insufficient for many. The legend persists because it is as much psychological as physical a manifestation of fear, curiosity, and the uncanny that thrives in darkness and uncertainty. The legend of Mothman is more than just an eerie story. It has left a lasting imprint on the town of Point Pleasant. Residents speak of the creature with a mix of fear, respect, and nostalgia. Its presence is commemorated with a 12-foot-tall statue, erected to honor the legend and the victims of the Silver Bridge collapse. The creature has become a symbol of the town itself, a reminder of the thin line between myth and reality, and the human need to explain tragedy through story. Encounters with Mothman are described as psychologically intense. Witnesses often report disorientation, sudden chills, racing hearts, and a sense of being watched. The creature's gaze is said to linger, even after it has disappeared, leaving observers with the sense that they have glimpsed something beyond ordinary experience. Some who claim encounters report dreams filled with Mothman imagery, wings spreading across the sky, red eyes glowing in darkness, and an overwhelming sense that change or disaster is imminent. These experiences reinforce the idea that Mothman is more than just a physical entity. It is a messenger, a portent, and a psychological enigma. Even today, decades after the original sightings, Mothman continues to appear in reports. Drivers on rural roads describe sudden glimpses of a large, winged figure illuminated by headlights. Hikers in remote areas claim to have seen it perched silently on ridges, watching as they pass. Each new report fuels the legend, keeping it alive in the public consciousness. The creature's association with warnings and disasters ensures that even casual believers remain cautious when traveling in areas historically linked to sightings. Mothman's enduring appeal lies in the combination of fear, mystery, and tragedy. It is a creature rooted in the real world yet connected to the supernatural, a being whose presence challenges the boundaries of what we understand. Its glowing red eyes, silent flight, and ominous timing have left a psychological mark on those who encounter it, creating stories that are shared, remembered, and feared. The legend thrives because it is compelling, terrifying, and impossible to fully dismiss. In the forests, hills, and roads of Point Pleasant, Mothman waits, a shadow in the night, a warning in the dark, a reminder that some things exist beyond our understanding. Whether he is a cryptid, a supernatural omen, or the manifestation of collective fear, his presence continues to captivate, terrify, and inspire. And for those who travel through West Virginia after dusk, there is always the chance of seeing glowing red eyes in the shadows, a harbinger of something larger, something otherworldly, and something profoundly unsettling. Hotels are meant to be places of comfort, places where travelers find rest after long journeys. Yet, in some corners of the world, a different kind of story exists, one that turns the familiar into something terrifying. It is the tale of the vanishing hotel room, a phenomenon so strange and unsettling that those who experience it often question their own sanity. Travelers check in, spend the night, and wait to discover that the room they occupied no longer exists. Keys vanish, records disappear, and an oppressive sense of being erased lingers long after the stay. The first reports are almost always mundane. A traveler arrives late at night, weary from a long journey, and is assigned a room by the hotel staff. The room is unremarkable, sometimes charming, sometimes shabby, but normal in every way. Travelers sleep, wake, and go about their day. Yet when they attempt to return to the same room, either to retrieve belongings or confirm their reservation, they are met with confusion. The room number no longer exists. Hallways look different. Staff claim no knowledge of the room or the guest ever having stayed there. Receipts and registration forms vanish as if they were never created. One notable account comes from a business traveler staying in a mid-sized city, exhausted from a day of meetings. He checked into room 312, a modest room with a view of the street below. He unpacked, showered, and slept without incident. The next morning, he returned to the front desk to ask for directions to a nearby restaurant. Mentioning room 312, he was met with blank stares. The receptionist insisted that no such room existed in the hotel. He was shown the floor plan, and indeed, room 312 was absent. His luggage, which he had left inside, had also vanished. No records, no keys, no acknowledgement of his presence remained. The incident left him shaken and deeply unsettled. Reports of vanishing hotel rooms are not confined to any one location. They occur in major cities, remote towns, and historic inns alike. The phenomenon seems indifferent to geography or hotel class. Luxury hotels, small motels, and boutique inns have all been sites of similar experiences. Travelers often describe subtle changes leading up to the disappearance. Hallways that feel longer than they should, doors that seem slightly warped, and elevators that stop at non-existent floors. Sometimes, the room appears ordinary at first glance, but objects within are slightly out of place or appear to have been moved, as if reality itself has shifted. Psychologists and skeptics suggest that these experiences may be hallucinations, sleep paralysis, or stress-induced misperceptions. Yet the consistency of accounts, the repeated involvement of hotel staff, and the disappearance of records make purely psychological explanations difficult. Many travelers describe a pervasive feeling of being watched or followed in the hotel, as if unseen forces are aware of their every move. Some claim to have seen shadows move along the walls or caught glimpses of figures in the corner of their eyes, only for these figures to vanish when confronted directly. One chilling pattern emerges from multiple accounts. The room often seems tied to personal vulnerability. Guests report that their belongings, particularly items of sentimental or monetary value, disappear along with the room. Others mention feeling a sudden, inexplicable coldness upon entering, a heaviness in the air that presses against their chest. Electronic devices malfunction, phones lose signal, and alarm clocks stop working. It is as if the room exists partially in our world and partially in another, a liminal space that resists being pinned down by ordinary perception. Some theorists speculate that vanishing rooms are connected to temporal or dimensional anomalies. They propose that certain buildings may exist in multiple realities simultaneously, and that some rooms occasionally slip from one dimension to another. Travelers unlucky enough to occupy these rooms may find themselves temporarily trapped in a space that no longer adheres to the normal rules of time or memory. The sensation of being forgotten, the sense that no one will believe the story is part of the terror, reinforcing the disorienting and isolating nature of the experience. Accounts often include attempts to document the room, photographs, or videos, only to find that cameras fail or images come out corrupted. Keys disappear from pockets, receipts and credit card slips vanish without trace, and even hotel security cameras occasionally show no record of the guest entering the room. The more a traveler seeks evidence, the more the room seems determined to erase all traces of its existence. For those who experience it, the memory is vivid, the fear palpable, yet the world around them insists that nothing happened. The vanishing hotel room also carries a psychological weight that lasts long after the stay. Guests describe a creeping unease when entering new hotels, a lingering suspicion that reality itself might be unreliable. Dreams of endless corridors, locked doors, and empty hallways plague some travelers for months. The room becomes more than a physical location. It transforms into a symbol of impermanence, a reminder that even the familiar can betray us in ways we cannot anticipate. Histories of hotels with repeated vanishings are often carefully guarded, though local legends and whispered accounts persist. Some inns have acknowledged the phenomenon subtly, cautioning guests to respect the building's rules or avoid certain floors, though these warnings are rarely publicized. Others dismiss the tales entirely, reinforcing the idea that the rooms are not meant to exist for long, that their appearance and disappearance is a deliberate, unexplainable feature of the structure. The vanishing hotel room continues to fascinate as much as it frightens. Its power lies not in overt violence or physical harm, but in the profound sense of disorientation, erasure, and vulnerability it creates. Travelers leave the experience with questions that have no answers. Was the room real? Did anyone else see it? Why were their belongings affected? And most terrifying of all, will it happen again? Even today, stories circulate online and in travel forums. Travelers warn each other, sharing reports of mysterious floor plans, vanished rooms, and encounters that defy logic. Hotels, both historic and modern, are scrutinized for anomalies in design or layout, and yet no clear pattern emerges. The vanishing hotel room remains a mystery, a haunting reminder that sometimes the places we trust the most can become gateways to experiences that defy explanation. In the quiet hours of night, travelers continue to check into hotels, unaware of the unseen possibilities that lie behind closed doors. Somewhere in a hallway, a room may exist for a moment, only to disappear entirely, leaving those who stayed there to question the very nature of reality. Keys, records, and even memories fade, and the unsettling sensation of being forgotten lingers, long after the doors are locked behind them. In the early 1980s, amid the neon glow of arcades and the clatter of pinball machines, a legend emerged that would captivate gamers, conspiracy theorists, and horror enthusiasts alike. It is the story of Polybius, an arcade game unlike any other, said to be haunted, dangerous, and possibly part of a government experiment. The game itself is shrouded in mystery. Accounts describe it as a cabinet of shining black and red, filled with hypnotic, fast-moving visuals and a soundtrack that seemed to penetrate the mind. Players who approached Polybius often left changed, and in some cases, permanently altered. Reports first appeared in Portland, Oregon, where several arcades claimed to have received the game in 1981. Those who played it described immediate symptoms: intense headaches, nausea, and anxiety. Some reported vivid nightmares and hallucinations, while others experienced a compulsion to return to the machine again and again, unable to resist its pull. Rumors spread quickly. Arcade owners spoke of men in black suits who visited the machines nightly, collecting data from the games and asking strange, probing questions. They were never identified, and their purpose was never explained. The legend of Polybius grew rapidly as more players described strange effects: Children and teenagers reported temporary amnesia, vivid night terrors, and even seizures after extended play. Some accounts suggested that exposure to the game could alter behavior, making players more anxious, aggressive, or withdrawn. Those affected often described a sense of being watched, even when away from the arcade, as though the game had left a lingering presence in their minds. The gameplay itself was said to be hypnotic and disorienting. Bright, flashing lights, fast-moving geometric patterns, and a soundtrack of electronic pulses created an almost overwhelming sensory experience. Descriptions suggest that the game blurred the line between reality and illusion, inducing a state of dissociation in which players became deeply immersed, losing track of time and even their own sense of self. Many who tried Polybius spoke of feeling controlled or manipulated, as if the machine were aware of their thoughts and reactions. What made Polybius especially terrifying was the aura of secrecy surrounding it. Arcade employees who worked near the game reported unusual occurrences. Strange machines set up in dark corners, men in black monitoring players, and the mysterious removal of Polybius cabinets without explanation. Newspaper reports from the time describe a wave of strange incidents in Portland arcades, children complaining of headaches, mysterious phone calls to arcade owners, and reports of a sudden decline in arcade attendance after a prolonged exposure to the game. The lack of documentation fueled the myth, making it nearly impossible to separate truth from speculation. Some theorists suggest that Polybius was part of a government experiment on mind control or behavioral manipulation. According to these accounts, the game was designed to measure players' reactions, gather psychological data, and possibly even condition behavior. The men in black, the reports claim, were agents collecting information for unknown purposes. While no official records confirm these suspicions, the persistence of the legend has kept the theory alive for decades. Despite or perhaps because of its mysterious and terrifying reputation, Polybius became the subject of intense fascination. Gamers sought out any leads on its existence, while skeptics dismissed it as a combination of rumor, exaggeration, and urban myth. The lack of physical evidence, a single surviving cabinet, or concrete documentation only adds to its allure. Photos, scans, and recreations have appeared online over the years, but none can confirm the reality of the original machine. The legend thrives in that space between uncertainty and fear, where fact and fiction intertwine. The psychological effects attributed to Polybius continued to be reported, even decades after the alleged sightings. Accounts describe lingering anxiety, flashbacks of hypnotic visuals, and the sense that one's thoughts are being monitored or influenced. Some claim that simply speaking the name Polybius aloud can trigger vivid memories of the game's patterns and sounds, reinforcing the sense that it is not just a machine but an entity capable of imprinting itself on the mind. Cultural references have cemented Polybius in popular imagination. Movies, TV shows, and video games have referenced it as a cursed or haunted arcade game, often playing on the themes of mind control, paranoia, and unseen authority. The story has also inspired independent recreations of the game, using flashing visuals, disorienting audio, and hypnotic mechanics to evoke the sensation described by the legend. While these recreations are harmless, they serve as a chilling reminder of the power that the myth of Polybius holds over the imagination. What is particularly unsettling about Polybius is its plausibility. In the early 1980s, arcade technology was advanced enough to experiment with rapid visual patterns, intense sound design, and immersive gameplay. The combination of novelty, sensory overload, and social rumor made it easy for urban legends to thrive. Yet the story of Polybius resonates even today because it taps into deeper fears: the loss of control, the manipulation of the mind, and the unseen forces that may shape human behavior without consent. For those who encounter the legend for the first time, Polybius is more than a story about a video game. It is a reflection of human vulnerability. It preys on our curiosity, luring us with the promise of novelty while hinting at the dangers of surrendering control. The hypnotic lights, the pulsing soundtrack, and the sensation of being watched form a perfect storm of psychological terror. blurring the line between entertainment and menace. Even today, the legend persists. Forums, websites, and fan communities debate whether the game ever truly existed, sharing recreated versions, testimonials, and theories. Yet, the most compelling aspect is that the myth has survived in memory and imagination, proving that the fear of Polybius is independent of the machine itself. It is the idea of a game that can reach into the mind, that can control, haunt, and manipulate, that continues to captivate and terrify. Polybius remains a legend of technology and horror, a story where curiosity can lead to danger, and the boundary between reality and illusion is disturbingly thin. Whether it was ever real or exists purely in the collective imagination of a generation, its legacy is undeniable. The flashing lights, hypnotic sounds, and the lingering question of whether we are ever truly in control of our minds ensure that Polybius is more than just a myth. It is a cautionary tale, a haunted machine, and a haunting presence in the haunting prisons and the history of video games and urban legends alike. Beneath the streets of New York City, a world exists that few have seen and even fewer dare to imagine. The endless maze of tunnels, pipes, and dripping darkness that make up the city's sewer system has always held an air of mystery. But among the echoing rush of water and the flicker of dim maintenance lights, a legend has persisted for nearly a century, the tale of the sewer alligator of New York. To most, it's an urban myth, a tall tale told to amuse or scare. Yet for many residents, the legend feels all too real. They claim something alive slithers beneath the concrete jungle, something ancient, powerful, and monstrously out of place. The story began, as legends often do, with an odd event. In the early 1930s, newspapers reported strange sightings: alligators crawling from manholes, glimpsed in the dim glow of streetlights, before disappearing back underground. The first reports came after a heavy snowstorm in 1935. According to the accounts, a group of teenagers shoveling snow on East 123rd Street saw movement in a storm drain. Thinking it was a rat, they peered inside only to watch in horror as a massive reptile lunged toward them. It was described as an alligator, around 8 feet long, blackened by sewage and filth. The boys pulled the creature out with ropes and shovels, astonished that such a thing could exist so far from its natural home in the swamps of the South. The discovery made headlines. Newspapers called it a monster of the sewers. Skeptics scoffed, but others wondered, could the city's underground really sustain such a creature? Theories soon followed. Some suggested that baby alligators had been purchased as pets by wealthy New Yorkers, only to be flushed down toilets when they grew too large or aggressive. Once in the sewer system, these reptiles adapted, feeding on rats, waste, and whatever else the darkness offered. The warmth of the underground tunnels and the abundance of food, the theory claimed, allowed them to survive, even thrive. As the decades passed, reports continued. Sewer workers told unsettling stories of strange eyes reflecting in flashlight beams, of scraping sounds echoing in the distance, and of massive, reptilian tails vanishing into the black water. One veteran sewer inspector once told a reporter that he would never enter certain sections of the system alone. He insisted there were creatures down there huge, silent, and intelligent enough to avoid detection. The city government, of course, denied the rumors. Officials claimed that the environment of the sewer system was far too harsh for reptiles to survive. The water was too cold, the waste too toxic, the tunnels too isolated. And yet, people continued to report sightings, sometimes of full-grown alligators emerging through manholes after heavy rain, startling pedestrians and vanishing back underground. Police logs from the 1950s and 1960s record several instances of large reptiles found in alleys and drainage canals, always in Lower Manhattan or Brooklyn, never with an explanation for how they got there. Some researchers believe the truth may lie somewhere between myth and fact. It's possible, they argue, that alligators did once live in the sewers but could not survive long-term. Their occasional reappearance could be the result of escaped pets or illegal animal trades. Yet others point out the consistency of the reports, how they describe the same kind of creature, large and pale, with red, lidless eyes adapted to darkness. Some even claim the alligators have changed over generations, becoming something new, mutated by chemicals, and waste into pale, albino beasts that no longer resemble the creatures of the Florida swamps. Legends speak of one such beast, an enormous white alligator, scarred and blind, known among sewer workers as King Croc. Supposedly, it moves silently through the tunnels, feeding on anything it encounters. Some say it has grown to monstrous size, its scales coated in layers of grime and fungus, its skin ghostly from a lifetime away from sunlight. Those who claim to have seen it describe it as ancient and almost otherworldly, more specter than animal. Whether King Croc is real or just an embellishment on an old myth, it remains the most terrifying version of the story. In the 1980s, the legend was revived when sewer maintenance crews reported unusual blockages in several tunnels beneath the Bronx and Queens. When workers cleared the debris, they found massive bite marks on thick cables and pipes. Something had chewed through metal. No animal native to the city could have done that. Experts dismissed the idea, but whispers spread once more that the alligators were back. Today, the sewer alligator has become a fixture of New York folklore, as iconic as the city itself. It represents the hidden dangers of urban life, the things that thrive just beyond the reach of light and order. Tour guides mention it during haunted city walks, and street vendors sell t-shirts emblazoned with the slogan, "I survived the NYC sewer gator." But beneath the humor, there's an uneasy fascination, because even now, modern reports continue to trickle in. Late-night joggers claim to have seen dark shapes moving near storm drains. Utility workers talk about strange sounds echoing below, and occasionally, a grainy photo or video surfaces online, showing something massive and reptilian sliding through the black water, just long enough to reignite the debate. Scientists dismiss the legend as impossible. Yet deep down, many New Yorkers secretly wonder. The city's sewers stretch for thousands of miles, a subterranean labyrinth that few ever fully explore. Within those tunnels, anything could exist. The air is heavy with moisture, the darkness absolute, and the echoes endless. Down there, sound distorts, and shapes deceive. Perhaps the human imagination fills in the void. Or perhaps, as some insist, the void has already been filled with something that watches and waits. Something ancient and patient, something that remembers when it was thrown away. The sewer alligator is more than just a story about a monster in the dark. It is a reflection of the city itself, mysterious, alive, and always hiding secrets beneath its surface. Whether born from truth or myth, it embodies the uneasy thought that we are never truly alone, even beneath our feet. And maybe, just maybe, somewhere in the damp, echoing tunnels beneath. New York City, a massive creature still stirs in the shadows, its pale eyes gleaming in the dark, waiting for the next time the city forgets to look down. Late at night, when the city of Boston sleeps and the streets grow quiet, some claim to hear a faint rumble echoing through the tunnels beneath the city. It sounds like the rush of iron wheels, the rhythmic clatter of metal on metal, growing louder with every passing second. Yet, when investigators search for the source, they find nothing, no lights, no trains, only still air and the lingering vibration of something unseen. This is the legend of the ghost train of Boston, a phantom locomotive said to haunt the old subway lines, appearing on abandoned tracks before vanishing without a trace. The story dates back to the early 1900s, when Boston became one of the first cities in America to build an underground railway. The new subway system was a marvel of engineering, but it was also dangerous work. Men labored for long hours in stifling tunnels, surrounded by the constant risk of collapse, flooding, and gas leaks. Accidents were frequent, and many workers lost their lives beneath the city they were building. Some say their spirits never left, trapped forever in the tunnels where they met their end. The ghost train, according to legend, is the manifestation of their unfinished businesses, spectral reminder of the cost of progress. The first documented sighting came from a maintenance crew in 1914. The men were repairing a section of track near Boylston Station when they heard the sound of a train approaching. At first, they thought it was a scheduled car running late, but the line they were on had been closed for hours. The sound grew deafening. Lights flared in the darkness, a blinding white glow like headlights, cutting through fog. The men jumped clear of the tracks, expecting to feel the rush of air as the train passed, but there was nothing. The light disappeared, the sound faded, and the tunnel fell silent once more. When they inspected the rails, there were no signs of movement, no vibrations, no displaced gravel, not even a ripple in the dust. After that night, more stories began to surface. Train operators reported seeing flickering lights deep within closed tunnels, moving at impossible speeds. Some described glimpsing the shape of an old-fashioned locomotive, black and shining, its windows glowing faintly from within. Others swore they saw passengers staring out, faces pale and expressionless, like wax figures, vanishing as the train passed. The ghost train, they said, appeared on nights when fog rolled thick through the city, when the streets above were quiet and the air below seemed to hum with unseen energy. No one knows exactly what line the phantom favors. Some claim it travels the abandoned tunnels near the original Tremont Street subway, the oldest in the country. Others say it's been seen on disused freight tracks beneath South Station or along forgotten maintenance corridors that connect different parts of the system. Wherever it appears, the pattern is the same: the sound of a distant whistle, the screech of wheels, and a sudden flash of light that fades before anyone can get close. One of the most chilling accounts came from a night supervisor named Harold Bennett in the 1950s. He had been overseeing electrical maintenance near Park Street when his crew reported strange interference on the signal monitors. The system was detecting movement on a closed track. Thinking it might be a runaway car, Bennett went to investigate. As he stood on the platform, a cold gust swept through the tunnel. Then he heard the unmistakable sound of a train coming fast. He saw lights in the distance, heard the rails sing beneath him. The noise was so real that he stepped back, pressing himself against the wall as the train roared by. He described it later as a blur of silver and black, filled with faces pressed against fogged windows. When he opened his eyes, it was gone. The air was still. The signal lights showed nothing. Bennett quit his job 2 weeks later and refused to take the subway again for the rest of his life. Over time, the ghost train of Boston became part of local folklore. Subway operators whispered about it on overnight shifts, and commuters traded stories about strange lights flickering in tunnels during power outages. Some even claimed the phantom train served as a warning, appearing before real-life accidents or disasters, as if trying to alert the living. One operator recalled seeing the glowing outline of a train vanish into the darkness just days before a fatal derailment in the same section of track. Whether coincidence or omen, the sighting chilled everyone who heard it. Skeptics argued that the ghost train is nothing more than a mix of optical illusion, acoustic echo, and imagination. The tunnels are known to carry sound in unpredictable ways, and reflections from maintenance lights can easily create fleeting shapes that resemble movement. But those who experienced it firsthand insist there is more to it than tricks of the senses. They describe an atmosphere that changes when the phantom draws nearer, sudden drop in temperature, the faint scent of smoke and oil, and a strange feeling of being watched from the dark. In recent years, reports have grown rarer, though not extinct. Security cameras have captured unexplained blurs of light racing through empty tunnels, while late-night subway workers still speak of hearing a distant whistle when no trains are running. A few brave urban explorers claim to have recorded the phenomenon, though their footage often ends abruptly, as if equipment malfunctions the moment the apparition appears. Some say that the ghost train only reveals itself to those who are alone, those whose thoughts echo too loudly in the silence of the tunnels. Theories about its origin vary. Some believe it is the spirit of an early subway car lost in a forgotten section of tunnel, looping endlessly through its route. Others say it's a spectral collection of every soul that died during the subway's construction, bound together in the form of the machine that sealed their fate. A darker version claims the train carries lost passengers, those who vanished from stations over the decades, drawn into its endless route through the afterlife. Whether real or imagined, The ghost train endures because it speaks to something deeply human, the fear of being forgotten, of traveling endlessly without destination or rest. In the quiet tunnels beneath Boston, where echoes never die and shadows stretch on forever. That fear takes form in the shape of a speeding phantom that no one can stop and no one can prove. Even today, as modern trains thunder overhead, some nights the old sound returns, a low, distant rumble, growing louder, the vibration of steel beneath your feet. Then, a faint whistle, haunting and hollow, as a blur of light races past and disappears into the dark. And when the silence returns, only one thought remains. Not every train in Boston carries the living. Some are bound forever to the tunnels below, chasing a journey that never ends. In the stillness of winter, when the snow lies untouched and the world feels frozen in time, there are stories that chill more deeply than the cold itself. Among them is the tale of the devil's footprints, a mystery that once sent entire towns into panic. Its marks stamped across the white silence of night. These hoof-shaped impressions appeared suddenly, stretching for miles across villages, rooftops, and rivers, as if something impossible had walked straight through the world. For those who awoke to see them, it felt like a visitation from something ancient and evil, a reminder that even the purest snow can hide the mark of darkness. The story begins in February of 1855 in Devon, England, a quiet countryside known for its rolling hills and isolated villages. After a night of heavy snowfall, residents of the town of Exmouth awoke to find a trail of strange tracks winding through the snow. Each print was about 4 inches long, perfectly formed, and shaped like a cloven hoof. They stretched in single file, one after another, as though made by a creature walking on 2 legs. What made it truly unsettling was the pattern. The tracks continued unbroken over fences, rooftops, walls, and even across frozen rivers. Nothing living could have made such a path. The prints appeared overnight, and by morning they covered more than 100 miles of countryside. Farmers, priests, and townsfolk followed them in disbelief. They led through locked gardens, into barns, over snow-covered roofs, and out again into open fields, vanishing only where the snow gave way to stone. No one could explain how the trail could cross obstacles without breaking. People whispered that no earthly creature could travel like that. Some said it was an animal escaped from a traveling menagerie. Others swore it was a trick or a prank. But many believed something far more sinister had passed through their town. Panic spread quickly. Churches filled with frightened parishioners who sought answers in prayer. Priests warned of demonic visitation, citing scripture about the devil roaming the earth. Mothers kept their children indoors, while men with lanterns patrolled the streets, scanning for signs of the creature that had left its mark. Dogs refused to go outside. Livestock grew restless. The air was thick with unease. For weeks afterward, the hoofprints became the talk of every village, each report adding to the mystery. The local newspapers called it the Great Devon Mystery, publishing sketches of the strange prints and eyewitness accounts from those who had seen them firsthand. Some claimed the tracks changed shape as they went, sometimes resembling hooves, sometimes narrow slits, and other times small circles burned into the snow, as though the heat had melted the edges. Others said they saw faint scorch marks beneath the prints, as if the creature's hooves had been searing hot. These details only deepened the sense that something unnatural had passed through. Skeptics attempted to find rational explanations. Some suggested badgers or deer, though no known animal walked in such a perfect single file. Others proposed that the marks were made by hopping mice or birds dragging their tails. A few claimed that wind and thawing snow had distorted ordinary animal tracks into the eerie shapes, but none of these theories could account for how the prints crossed walls or roofs in continuous patterns. Each attempt to explain only made the mystery seem larger, as if the truth were slipping just beyond human understanding. For those who lived through it, the experience was unforgettable. Old diaries describe villagers gathering by lamplight to compare what they'd seen, voices trembling as they spoke of hearing strange sounds in the night, a rhythmic clatter, like hooves on cobblestone, echoing through the frozen darkness. Some reported catching glimpses of a dark figure moving along the tree line, vanishing as soon as they approached. One woman, in a letter dated that same February, wrote that she awoke to find the prints leading straight to her door and stopping there, as if something had stood outside waiting. Over the years, the devil's footprints became legend, passed down through generations as a warning that the devil himself had once walked the earth. Some say the prints still appear on rare winter nights, when the snow falls thick and the air is utterly still. There have been reports in the early 20th century of similar hoof marks appearing across Europe and even in small American towns, always after a heavy snowfall, always following the same eerie pattern. Each time, panic followed, and each time, no explanation could be found. In 1920, residents of a village in Scotland awoke to find cloven tracks in fresh snow, leading from the churchyard straight into the hills. Locals remembered the old Devon stories and were terrified. In 1945, similar prints appeared in the Polish countryside, stretching for miles, crossing fields and rooftops in a straight, impossible line. No one saw the creature that made them, but those who followed the trail said they felt watched the entire time, as though something invisible moved just ahead of them. What makes the legend endure is the detail, the precision of the prints, their impossible paths, and the sheer number of witnesses. It's not the story of one person's imagination, but a collective memory of fear etched into the snow. The idea that something could cross through our world silently, leaving perfect signs of its passage, challenges our understanding of the natural order. It suggests that there are moments when the boundaries between worlds blur, when something ancient and malevolent slips through unnoticed. Today, the devil's footprints have become a symbol of the unexplained, often dismissed as folklore, yet never fully forgotten. Even with modern science and technology, no definitive answer has ever been found. Historians still pore over old accounts, and cryptozoologists revisit the pattern, trying to match it with any known species. Yet, the mystery persists, as cold and impenetrable as the snow itself. For those who study the supernatural, the story of the devil's footprints is more than a curiosity, it's a reminder of how fragile our sense of reality can be. One night of snowfall transformed entire towns into places of dread. Ordinary people became witnesses to something extraordinary, something that defied nature. The snow melted, but the fear it left behind lingered, passed from voice to voice, generation to generation. And even now, when a silent winter night blankets the earth and fresh snow falls unbroken across the fields, there are those who still glance outside their windows before dawn. They look for the telltale signs, the neat, cloven prints, marching in perfect line through the drifts, leading from nowhere to nowhere. And they remember the old legend of Devon, whispering to themselves that maybe, just maybe, the devil still walks on cold winter nights, leaving his footprints behind for those brave enough, for foolish enough to follow. In the wooded hills of western Pennsylvania, where the mist rolls low across winding roads and the trees seem to whisper old secrets, locals speak of a figure known only as the Green Man. For decades, travelers have claimed to see him in eerie, green-skinned humanoid wandering the backroads near Paxton and South Park, his presence cloaked in both terror and sorrow. He appears only at night, moving silently through the darkness, his face faintly glowing, his movements slow and deliberate. To some, he's a monster. To others, he's a spirit. But to those who have seen him up close, he's something far more unsettling, something that feels both human and not. The legend of the Green Man began as a whisper among local teens who would drive the empty Pennsylvania backroads late at night. They told stories of a man whose skin shimmered an unnatural green, whose face was disfigured, and whose hollow eyes reflected the glow of passing headlights. The tales spread through word of mouth, growing darker with each retelling. Some said he was radioactive, a remnant of government experiments gone wrong. Others claimed he was an escaped mental patient who lived in the tunnels beneath the town, feeding on whatever crossed his path. Yet others swore he was the ghost of a man struck by lightning, cursed to wander the earth, glowing with the mark of his death. But the truth behind the legend is more complex and perhaps more tragic than any of those stories. In the early 1900s, the towns surrounding Paxton and South Park were home to rail yards, coal mines, and small working-class communities. Among the residents was a quiet man named Raymond Robinson, who lived a life of painful solitude. When he was a boy, a terrible accident changed him forever. At just 8 years old, Raymond climbed a power line near Morado Bridge, unaware it carried high-voltage electricity. The current coursed through his body, leaving him horribly burned and disfigured. His skin was left scarred and uneven, giving it a strange greenish hue under certain lights. His eyes were damaged, leaving him nearly blind, and his nose was mostly gone. Unable to live a normal life, Raymond became a recluse. During the day, he stayed hidden in his family home, crafting belts and wallets from leather to pass the time. But when night fell, and the roads grew quiet, he would take long walks along the highways and back roads between Copel, Paxton, and South Park. Locals often saw him walking in the dark, tapping the guardrails with a stick to guide his way. At first, those who encountered him were terrified. Drivers would spot his glowing skin in their headlights, the scars catching the light in such a way that he seemed to emit a faint green aura. He never approached anyone, but he didn't run either. He would simply stand still and watch as cars passed by. Some who stopped to speak with him discovered he was kind and soft-spoken, even friendly. Others fled in panic, convinced they'd seen something supernatural. Word spread quickly through the region. The stories transformed Raymond into something larger than life. He was no longer a man. He was the Green Man, a phantom of the night roads. Teenagers began driving the back roads, hoping to see him, daring each other to call out into the darkness. Over time, as myths do, the tale grew distorted. In some versions, the Green Man was said to be headless. In others, he glowed with toxic light, seeking revenge on those who mocked him. Some claimed that if you honked 3 times at midnight on certain roads, he would appear, his glowing face emerging from the tree line. The truth and the legend fused together until no one could tell them apart. Even after Raymond passed away in 1985, sightings continued. People reported seeing a greenish figure on the side of the road late at night, always near the same stretch of highway. In some accounts, the figure vanishes as soon as headlights hit him. In others, he seems to materialize out of the fog, walking slowly toward the car before disappearing entirely. Local police and historians have long insisted that most of these sightings are just imagination, a trick of the light, or perhaps a shadow playing tricks on tired drivers. Yet, too many people have described the same eerie image for it to be ignored. Some claim the sightings intensified in the years immediately following Raymond's death, as though his spirit never left the roads he once walked. Residents of Paxton still talk about the Green Man with a mixture of fear and affection. Some older locals remember leaving cigarettes or soda on the roadside for Raymond during his nightly walks. Others remember how polite he was, even to those who stared or whispered. And yet, the legend persists not just because of who he was, but because of what he represents. The Green Man is both a ghost story and a mirror of human cruelty, the way fear can twist an ordinary man into a monster in the minds of others. But the legend didn't stay confined to western Pennsylvania. Over the decades, stories of green-skinned or glowing humanoids began to surface in nearby states Ohio, West Virginia, even as far north as New York. In each version, the creature walks the roads alone, appearing briefly before fading into the darkness. Some paranormal investigators link these modern sightings to Raymond's story, suggesting that the energy surrounding his legend created something larger, a spectral echo that still lingers. Others think the Green Man has become a kind of archetype, a symbol of all those who've been forgotten, misunderstood, or pushed to the edges of society. Late-night drivers still report strange occurrences along the old routes near Paxton. Headlights flicker without reason. Radios cut to static. A faint figure can sometimes be seen reflected in the rearview mirror. Man walking alone in the middle of the road, his outline tinged with an unearthly green light. When drivers stop to look, he's gone, leaving only the sound of the wind and the endless hum of the highway. Those who've seen him describe the experience as profoundly unsettling, not because the Green Man is violent, but because his presence feels impossibly real. There's something deeply human in his movements, a quiet sadness in the way he seems to drift just beyond the reach of light. And for those who know the history, it's impossible not to wonder if it's Raymond himself, still walking the same roads he once traveled, searching for peace he never found in life. Today, the Green Man of Paxton stands as one of Pennsylvania's most enduring legends. He's part ghost story, part cautionary tale, and part tragic remembrance of a man who lived on the edge of society. His story blurs the line between folklore and reality, between fear and empathy. Whether a restless spirit or a lingering memory, the Green Man reminds us that every legend begins with truth and that sometimes the scariest stories are not about monsters at all, but about what happens when humanity turns away from its own. Tucked deep within the dense forests of Appalachia, far from the nearest highway, lies a stretch of land once known as Lost Creek. Few maps mark its location anymore, and those who live nearby avoid speaking of it after dark. The village, they say, was swallowed whole one night. Its people, its sounds, its life vanished without a trace. To this day, Lost Creek stands as a ghostly scar on the earth, its silent ruins whispering of something ancient and terrible that does not wish to be found. The story begins in the late 1800s, when settlers established a small mining community along a creek that wound through the foothills of West Virginia. The area was rich with coal and limestone, and for a time, Lost Creek prospered. Families built tidy wooden homes, a schoolhouse, and a small church with a white steeple that could be seen for miles through the trees. The creek itself shimmered in the sunlight, winding lazily through the valley, and locals swore the water had a strange, almost luminous quality under the moon. Life in Lost Creek was quiet, but not without its mysteries. From its founding, the settlers spoke of odd noises echoing from the woods at night, low hums, like distant voices, carried on the wind. Hunters claimed to find animal carcasses arranged in strange circles. Miners reported tunnels collapsing for no reason, even when the supports were sound. Still, the work was steady, and the people endured. They chalked up the oddities to the isolation, to the strange moods of the mountain. It wasn't until 1893 that things began to unravel. That winter was harsher than any the village had known. Snow buried the rooftops, and the creek froze solid. Supplies ran low. Families burned furniture for warmth. And that was when the first of the disappearances began. A miner named Samuel Porter was the first to vanish. He left for the night shift and never returned. His tools were found beside the mine entrance, and his footprints ended abruptly just a few yards into the snow. No struggle, no blood, just gone. Within a week, 2 more men disappeared the same way, their tracks stopping in mid-stride as though they'd walked into thin air. The townsfolk began to panic. Some said the land itself was cursed. Others whispered that something lived in the forest, something old, watching, waiting. The preacher urged calm and called for nightly prayers in the church, but even the steeple bell began to sound wrong, its tone warped, as if echoing from deep underground. One night in February, a young girl named Abigail Harper claimed she saw glowing shapes by the creek, figures of pale light moving slowly through the trees. When her father followed her footprints the next morning, they led to the frozen water's edge, where they simply stopped. Abigail was never found. From that day forward, the village seemed to fall under a spell of silence. The birds stopped singing. The wind grew still. People began locking themselves indoors after sunset. Lanterns burned late into the night behind shuttered windows. And then, suddenly, it was over. A few weeks later, a group of traders passing through the valley noticed something strange. Smoke no longer rose from Lost Creek's chimneys. The fields were overgrown. The paths snowed over. When they entered the village, they found every home perfectly intact, meals, half-eaten, fires long dead, doors standing open. The church bell hung silent, swaying slightly in the breeze. The miners' lamps were still lined neatly outside the shaft entrance, as if waiting for their owners to return. But not a single person remained. The traders fled and brought word to nearby towns. But when search parties arrived days later, even the animals were gone. No bodies were ever found. No sign of struggle, no footprints leading away. It was as though the people of Lost Creek had simply ceased to exist. In the years that followed, stories spread like wildfire. Some claimed the creek's water had turned black the night before the disappearance, bubbling as if boiling from beneath. Others spoke of a low hum, filling the air, an otherworldly vibration that made the ground tremble. A few even claimed to have seen lights in the sky over the village, shimmering green and gold, vanishing just before dawn. The most enduring rumor, however, was that the village had been built atop sacred ground, an ancient burial site belonging to a forgotten tribe that had lived in the valley centuries before. Local folklore held that the creek marked a thin place, a boundary between worlds, where the veil between the living and the dead sometimes tore. Old maps of the region show no record of any such tribe, yet the stories persist. Over the decades, explorers and thrill-seekers have tried to find Lost Creek. Some claim to have stumbled upon it deep in the woods, hidden behind walls of thick brush. Those who do find it never stay long. Visitors report hearing whispers that seem to come from underground, and seeing faint lights flickering inside the abandoned houses. Compasses spin wildly near the creek, and electronic devices fail without explanation. One man, a photographer from Pittsburgh, visited the site in the 1970s hoping to document the ruins. He never published his photos, but his journal was later found by his brother. He wrote that he heard soft footsteps behind him while setting up his camera. Though he was completely alone, the final entry in his notebook simply read, "They're still here, just not where we can see them." He was never seen again. Locals say the ground around Lost Creek shifts subtly, as if the land itself is breathing. The old creek has long since dried to a trickle. Yet on moonless nights, some claim to hear the faint sound of running water. A few even say that if you listen closely, you can hear voices carried on the wind, murmurs that sound like prayers, or perhaps warnings. Scientists and historians have offered countless explanations: sinkholes swallowing the village whole, carbon monoxide poisoning from the mines, or mass hysteria caused by isolation. Yet none of those theories explain why the houses remain untouched, or why not a single body was ever recovered. Today, the area is avoided by hunters and hikers alike. The forest has reclaimed much of it, but beneath the vines and moss, the skeletons of Lost Creek still remain: rotting beams, rusted lanterns, and the faint outlines of footsteps preserved in the earth. And sometimes, under the cold light of the moon, those who pass nearby say they see something moving among the trees, a flicker of human shape, pale and silent, just beyond the edge of vision. They say it's the villagers, still trapped somewhere between one world and the next, bound to the place they called home. No one dares to linger long enough to find out. For in Lost Creek, it's said that once you hear the whispering voices, once you step too close to the silent houses, the forest begins to close in around you. And when morning comes, you too might be gone, another soul vanished into the legend of the vanishing village of Lost Creek. Beneath the bustling streets of Chicago lies a labyrinth few dare to explore. Abandoned tunnels, maintenance corridors, and forgotten sewer systems stretching for miles beneath the city. For decades, stories have circulated of a vengeful spirit haunting these tunnels, being known as the Sewer Witch of Chicago. According to legend, she is a figure cloaked in shadow, her face pale and twisted with rage, and she waits in the darkness to lure the unwary underground, where they are never seen again. The origins of the sewer, which are murky, blending fact with folklore. Some say she was once a woman named Margaret Kane, a healer who lived in the city during the 1800s. Margaret was known for her knowledge of herbs and remedies, and townspeople whispered that she dabbled in curses, protecting herself from those who sought to exploit her abilities. When the city grew and industrialization took hold, she was accused of witchcraft. A mob, fueled by fear and superstition, dragged her into the streets one winter night. They threw her into the sewers as punishment, where she vanished into the darkness. From that moment, the legend claims, her spirit refused to rest, bound to the tunnels beneath Chicago, seeking vengeance against anyone who intruded upon her domain. The first documented stories of the sewer, which date back to the early 1900s. Sewer maintenance crews occasionally reported strange sounds echoing through empty tunnels, soft whispering voices, followed by sudden, chilling laughter. Men carrying lanterns claimed to see flickering shadows at the far end of the tunnels, always disappearing when approached. Tools and equipment would vanish without explanation, only to reappear in entirely different sections of the sewer system. Each incident was dismissed as the work of pranksters or an overactive imagination, but the frequency and consistency of the reports gave rise to the belief that something far darker lingered beneath the city. The most unsettling accounts often came from urban explorers, thrill seekers, who ventured into Chicago's forgotten underworld at night. They described feeling watched, sensing eyes following them from the shadows. Some reported hearing footsteps echoing behind them, even when they were alone. Others claimed that the air itself seemed to grow colder, heavier, as though the tunnels themselves were alive. A few ventured far enough to glimpse her or what they believed to be her. Witnesses described a tall, gaunt figure, her skin pale as ash, her hair tangled and dark, with eyes that glowed faintly in the blackness. She did not speak, but her presence alone was enough to drive those who saw her into panic. The sewer, which is said to have her own methods of luring victims. Some explorers report hearing soft, melodic singing, echoing from deep within the tunnels. Others hear calls for help, faint and urgent, as though someone is trapped and begging to be rescued. Driven by curiosity or compassion, people follow these sounds, unaware that the calls are traps. Those who disappear are never found. Some speculate that she feeds on fear itself, drawing strength from the terror she creates. Others believe she claims her victims as punishment, punishing the living for the injustice done to her long ago. One particularly chilling tale comes from the 1930s, when a group of workmen were repairing a collapsed section of the sewer near the West Loop. While inspecting the site at night, they claimed to hear faint cries for help from within the tunnel. One man, a young laborer named Thomas, insisted on crawling inside to investigate. His colleagues begged him to stop, but he refused. Hours later, when the men attempted to find him, the tunnel was empty. No trace of Thomas remained. Some say that he still wanders the sewer, forever trapped by the witch herself, a warning to anyone who would venture too far. Over time, the legend grew, spreading from workers to local newspapers and then to the city's urban folklore. Parents would warn their children never to play near sewer grates at night. Graffiti and old newspaper clippings speak of encounters, each adding layers to the story. A glowing figure darting across a tunnel, a shadow that passes through walls, whispers that mimic a loved one's voice, coaxing victims deeper into the dark. Even skeptics began to admit a chilling fact. Something about the abandoned tunnels of Chicago feels unnatural, a lingering malevolence that cannot be fully explained. In recent decades, adventurers and paranormal investigators have attempted to locate the sewer, which some bring cameras, others carry EMF detectors, and a few even conduct audio recordings to capture unexplained phenomena. Occasionally, devices pick up faint whispers, cold spots, or fleeting shadows, but nothing concrete ever emerges. The tunnels themselves are treacherous. Sudden drops, collapsing walls, toxic gases, and maze-like passages. Many who return from these explorations describe an overwhelming feeling of dread, an instinctive understanding that the city above is safer than anything below. Despite the dangers, the sewer which continues to capture the imagination of Chicago residents. The story has been told on late-night radio shows, in local legends, and even in books about haunted urban sites. She represents the hidden darkness beneath civilization, the unknown that thrives beneath the streets of a city that never sleeps. The witch is not just a ghost story. She is a reminder that beneath the familiar, the mundane, there is always a shadow waiting. Those who claim to have encountered her speak of the same thing, an oppressive silence that falls over the tunnel, broken only by her whispers or laughter, the slow, deliberate sound of footsteps following, and a sense of being drawn deeper into the abyss. And when she disappears, leaving only the echo of her presence, it is as if the darkness itself has exhaled a warning that the city above is safe only while the sun shines. The sewer witch of Chicago has become a cautionary tale, a story told to warn thrill seekers and children alike. She embodies fear, isolation, and vengeance. Some say she will remain in the tunnels forever, waiting for the unwary, a reminder of injustice long past. Others believe that those who respect the darkness can walk safely through the city's underground, but those who are curious, greedy, or reckless risk vanishing forever. Even today, if you pass a darkened manhole in Chicago late at night, and if the wind carries faint whispers or the air grows inexplicably cold, you might wonder what else lurks beneath the city streets. And somewhere below, in the endless tunnels, the sewer which waits, patient, silent, watching, ready to claim the next soul who dares to follow her into the shadows. On the winding roads of the Blue Ridge Parkway, where the mist rolls thick through the mountains and the trees stretch like silent sentinels over the asphalt, travelers sometimes encounter a presence that defies explanation. Locals call her the phantom hitchhiker, spectral figure who appears suddenly at the roadside, asking for a ride before vanishing without a trace. Over the decades, countless drivers have reported seeing her, each encounter chilling in its own way, leaving witnesses terrified and questioning the boundaries between the living and the dead. The legend has persisted for nearly a century, though its origins are shrouded in mystery. The Blue Ridge Parkway, with its sharp curves, steep cliffs, and dense forests, has long been a site of accidents. In the early 20th century, a young woman named Elizabeth Harper Orr, so the story goes, died tragically in a car crash along one of its narrow curves. She was said to have been returning home from a visit to her family when her vehicle skidded off the road during a foggy night, plunging into a ravine. By the time rescuers arrived, there was nothing left to be done. Elizabeth's death, sudden and violent, became the foundation for the stories that would haunt the parkway for generations. According to eyewitnesses, the phantom hitchhiker appears most often on nights when the fog is thick and visibility is low. Drivers report seeing a young woman standing by the shoulder of the road, dressed in a pale coat or a white dress that seems to shimmer in the dim light of passing headlights. Her hair is dark, her expression blank or sorrowful, and she often raises a thumb to signal a ride. Some describe her as appearing wet or cold, as if she has just emerged from a river or the morning dew. Those who stop often speak of an overwhelming feeling of unease. The moment she enters the car, her presence is silent at first, yet it is heavy, oppressive, pressing down on the driver in a way that seems almost physical. Many say she stares straight ahead, never speaking, her eyes vacant yet somehow all-seeing. Occasionally, she might gesture toward a curve or point out a road, but when drivers glance at her, again moments later, she is gone. Sometimes the seat where she sat is cold, sometimes damp, and occasionally a small object is left behind. A scarf, a note, or even a piece of jewelry, only to vanish shortly after or be found to be completely impossible. The phenomenon is not limited to a single section of the parkway. Drivers have reported encounters along stretches in North Carolina and Virginia alike. Though the pattern is consistent, she appears suddenly on a remote section of road, climbs into the vehicle, and disappears before reaching any destination. In some accounts, she vanishes mid-drive. In others, she is gone the moment the driver looks away for a brief moment. What is particularly unsettling is the reaction of the witnesses. Nearly everyone describes a lingering sense of dread, as though the air itself has been poisoned with a memory of death and sorrow. One particularly chilling account comes from a man named Carl Mitchell, a delivery driver in the 1970s. Carl was driving late at night along a stretch of the parkway near Linville when he saw her, a young woman with long, dark hair and a white coat, standing beside a guardrail as fog swirled around her. Feeling a mix of fear and sympathy, he slowed the truck and motioned for her to climb in. She did so silently, taking the passenger seat without a word. As he drove, Carl tried to make conversation, asking her where she was headed. The woman simply stared ahead, eyes empty, and a shiver ran down his spine. Moments later, approaching a particularly sharp curve, he glanced to the passenger side and she was gone. The seat was empty, the door closed, and the faint scent of lilacs lingered in the air. Carl would never forget the look in her eyes, haunting him for decades. Another report came from a group of college students in the late 1980s. They were traveling the parkway during a foggy autumn evening when they noticed a figure standing by the side of the road, thumb raised. Thinking it was a prank or a friend, they stopped. A young woman entered the car, silent and pale, and remained motionless for the remainder of the drive. When they reached the next overlook, she was gone, leaving the seat cold and damp, as though she had simply melted into the air. Terrified, the students hurried down the road, vowing never to speak of what they had seen. Skeptics dismissed the sightings as misidentifications, hallucinations caused by fatigue, or even pranks by locals familiar with the legend. Yet the consistency of the reports is difficult to ignore. She is always young, always pale, always silent, and always disappears in a way that defies logic. Psychologists who study folklore suggest that the phantom hitchhiker represents collective memory and unresolved trauma, manifestation of the fear of sudden death on treacherous roads. Others maintain that it is the ghost of Elizabeth Harper herself, endlessly replaying her final moments. Unable to find rest, the legend persists not only because of eyewitness accounts, but also because it taps into universal fears, the vulnerability of night travel, the isolation of mountain roads, and the eerie sensation of being watched. The Blue Ridge Parkway is long and winding, with stretches of darkness where fog can appear without warning. It is in these moments that the human mind is most susceptible to the uncanny, and it is here that the phantom hitchhiker is said to roam. Even today, travelers along the parkway are warned to exercise caution, not just because of the curves and cliffs, but because of the stories that linger in the mist. Late-night drivers swear by them, sharing tales of flickering headlights, revealing a pale figure, or the sensation of an unseen presence riding alongside them. Those who have experienced it speak of a coldness that cannot be explained, a silence so profound that it presses against the mind, and an emptiness in the seat where she once sat. The phantom hitchhiker of the Blue Ridge Parkway has become more than just a ghost story. She embodies the tension between the living and the dead, the known and the unknown, the fear of roads we cannot control and moments we cannot predict. She is a reminder that even in modern times, the mountains carry old sorrows, and the misty roads of the parkway may conceal more than the eye can see. For anyone traveling the Blue Ridge at night, there is a lesson whispered in the wind and carried along the curves. Some travelers are not bound by life, and some journeys are never meant to be completed. The next time fog rolls thick and headlights catch a figure on the shoulder of the road, think carefully before stopping. For the phantom hitchhiker waits, silent and sorrowful, to share a ride you may never finish. Across the United States, scattered from rural back roads to forgotten country lanes, there exists a network of bridges shrouded in eerie reputation. Locals call them the Screaming Bridges, places where travelers report hearing blood-curdling shrieks in the dead of night. These are no ordinary sounds of the wind or creek below. Witnesses insist they are unmistakably human, raw, anguished cries that echo through the darkness. Across states and decades, the stories are remarkably consistent, tying these sites to tragic deaths, accidents, or acts of violence that left a permanent mark on the land. One of the most infamous accounts comes from a bridge in Ohio, spanning a narrow creek between dense woods. The structure is old, its iron beams rusted and creaking with the slightest gust of wind. Locals have long told stories of a young woman who in the 1800s threw herself from the bridge after a heartbreak too deep to bear. Travelers say that on quiet nights, particularly under a new moon, her scream rises from the water below, echoing across the creek and freezing the blood of anyone within earshot. Drivers report pulling over to listen, only to find the source of the sound impossible to locate, as though the scream itself is untethered from any physical body. In Pennsylvania, another bridge carries a similar legend. It spans a bend in a river where a vehicle plunged into the cold water one stormy night in the early 20th century. The driver was never recovered. Years later, teenagers dared each other to stop on the bridge at midnight. Many describe hearing the engine of a car revving below, followed by a human scream that seems to circle the bridge multiple times. One student recounted feeling the air grow icy and heavy, as if the water itself had inhaled a lungful of grief and released it in sonic form. Even those who are skeptical admit a strange sense of dread hangs in the air at that spot. The pattern repeats in the South. In Georgia, a wooden bridge near a secluded creek has been the site of numerous car accidents over the years. Locals claim the screams are most intense in the late evening, when the fog rolls in from the river and muffles all other sound. One man, returning home from work in 1978, swore he heard a woman shouting for help. He stopped and leaned over the guardrail, looking into the mist. The creek appeared empty, but the scream had not stopped, seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. By the time he drove away, he reported feeling shaken to his core, certain that some unseen presence had brushed against him, cold and heavy as a winter wind. In Missouri, a rural iron bridge spanning a slow river has a reputation for blood-curdling shrieks that have persisted for more than a century. According to legend, a young man was struck by a train as he tried to cross the bridge in darkness. Witnesses say his screams were so loud that they carried across the countryside, imprinting themselves into the structure. Even today, cars passing over the bridge at night report an almost tangible vibration in the beams, followed by the unmistakable sound of a terrified human voice. Locals swear it is the spirit of the young man, replaying his final moments over and over. The consistency of these stories has fueled debate among folklorists and paranormal investigators. Skeptics argue that wind, water, and the natural acoustics of bridges could explain some of the noises. Echoes in the hollow undersides of structures can distort ordinary sounds, amplifying them into something terrifying. Animals trapped in undergrowth or riverbanks could contribute as well. Yet these explanations fail to account for the emotional content of the screams. Witnesses consistently describe anguish and panic, not random noise. Many claim that the sound feels alive, as if the pain of the deceased is somehow replaying itself in the air around the bridge. Even more unsettling are the tales of people who attempt to interact with the phenomenon. Some visitors claim that when they call out or respond to the screams, the sound stops abruptly. Others report the opposite. The cries intensify, almost as if the spirit is aware of their presence and is trying to reach them. A small number of urban explorers have recorded audio while under the bridge, capturing guttural screams that, upon playback, seem to warp and stretch in impossible ways. These recordings cannot be fully explained by ambient noise or equipment error, and they have fueled countless local legends. Tragic accidents and violence seem to leave a permanent mark on the world, and nowhere is this more evident than on the screaming bridges. They are built from iron and wood, stone and concrete, but, over time, human sorrow and terror have imprinted themselves upon the structure. Drivers who pass alone at night often report a sudden chill, a weight pressing on their chest, or the feeling that someone or something is moving behind them. Even when they see nothing, the screams linger in the memory, haunting long after the bridge itself has been left behind. Psychologists suggest that these stories endure because they exploit a primal fear. Isolation combined with helplessness. Bridges span liminal spaces over rivers, valleys, and ravines, places where danger is already inherent. When the unknown is added, particularly in darkness, the mind interprets ambiguous sounds as meaningful, often in terrifying ways. The screaming bridge legend taps into these instincts, turning ordinary infrastructure into a vessel for supernatural fear. For generations, these locations have become ritualized spaces of folklore. Teenagers dare each other to spend a night beneath the bridge. Thrill seekers record footage for paranormal shows, and drivers slow down as they cross, gripping the wheel a little tighter. The stories persist not because bridges themselves are haunted, but because the human imagination is haunted and it seeks continuity. Every new scream, whether real or imagined, adds another layer to the legend. Even today, travelers report hearing the sound while crossing old, abandoned bridges. The scream rises suddenly, echoing through the steel beams, over the river, and into the night. Drivers stop, peering into darkness, but see nothing. Some leave offerings, coins, flowers, or notes placed carefully on the guardrails, hoping to appease whatever lingers there. And whether it is the echo of past tragedies, a supernatural presence, or the interplay of sound and shadow, The Screaming Bridge remains a haunting reminder that not all human sorrow can be contained. The bridges endure as silent witnesses to the tragedies of the past, connecting not only land and water, but life and death, memory and fear. And when the wind is just right, and the night is deep and silent, some say the cries return, echoing across the black waters below, ensuring that no one who crosses alone will ever forget the terror that once walked these roads. In the quiet valleys and shadowed forests of New York, where the leaves of the Hudson Valley whisper with every gust of wind, the legend of Sleepy Hollow persists, centuries after its first telling. Most know it from Washington Irving's story The Headless Horseman Who Rides Under the Moonlight, a specter of vengeance and sorrow but for residents of the region. The tale is more than fiction. Many swear that, on certain nights, the headless rider still roams the winding roads and wooded paths, a ghostly presence that merges history with lingering terror. Sleepy Hollow itself is a small town, nestled along the banks of the Hudson River. Its streets are lined with centuries-old stone houses, and the surrounding woods hold secrets older than the town itself. Locals often speak of eerie silences that descend at twilight, of shadows that seem too deliberate to be mere branches or rocks. The story of the Headless Horseman is told as both a caution and a warning. Beware the roads after dark, for there are forces that have never rested, forces born from betrayal, violence, and unfinished business. The legend centers on Ichabod Crane, a school teacher who came to the village in the early 19th century. According to Irving, Crane was ambitious, perhaps vain, and deeply fascinated by the supernatural tales of the area. He courted Katrina Van Tassel, daughter of a wealthy farmer, and his attention drew the ire of Brombones, a rival suitor. The night of a harvest party would change everything. Ichabod rode home along a deserted path through the dark woods where the legend says the Headless Horseman waits. A figure appeared, mounted and headless, swinging a jack-o'-lantern as though it were a weapon. Crane vanished that night, leaving only his hat and a shattered pumpkin behind. The story, part folklore and part cautionary tale, became an enduring piece of American literature. But for some, the narrative was rooted in truth. Residents of Sleepy Hollow claim the spectral rider is no mere story. Witnesses describe a figure cloaked in dark, flowing garments, mounted on a black steed that moves silently across the fields. Its head is missing nor replaced with a glowing pumpkin. Travelers along the old country roads report hearing the clatter of hooves at impossible speed. Yet, when they glance over the shoulder or turn around, nothing is there. Some describe a sudden coldness, a shiver of fear that descends inexplicably, as though the night itself is aware of the rider's presence. One account comes from a farmer who lived on the outskirts of town in the 1920s. He was returning home after repairing a fence when he noticed a dark figure racing along the edge of the woods, holding a glowing light. Terrified, he stopped his horse and called out, but the rider did not answer. As he watched, the figure leaped across a small ravine and vanished into the trees, leaving nothing behind but the distant echo of hooves. The man's hair turned white that night, he claimed, and he never traveled that road after dark again. The Headless Horseman is often associated with death and vengeance, and the legend suggests that those who see him are marked in some way. Some believe he seeks justice for a wrong done long ago, while others think he targets the prideful and greedy, dragging them into the darkness as punishment. There are stories of travelers who attempted to outrun the figure, only to find themselves inexplicably back on the same road, as if trapped in a looping nightmare. Others report waking from sleep, drenched in sweat, convinced they heard the clatter of hooves and the hollow wind of the rider passing by their windows. Over the years, Sleepy Hollow has become a magnet for the curious and the brave. Tourists flock to the old bridges and graveyards, hoping to glimpse the phantom horseman. Some claim success. Visitors report sudden drops in temperature, strange shadows flitting between gravestones, and fleeting glimpses of a headless figure galloping through the fog. Others hear a low, hollow groan, a sound that seems both animal and human, echoing through the trees. Photographs taken in the area occasionally show inexplicable blurs or dark shapes, although skeptics attribute these to natural causes or camera errors. Yet the stories endure, passed from generation to generation, growing with each telling. Sleepy Hollow itself has embraced the legend while never fully explaining it. Signs along rural roads warn travelers to proceed with caution at night. Local festivals celebrate the story, blending historical reenactments with eerie performances meant to capture the thrill of the unknown. Residents share their own experiences, recounting the chills of unexplained noises, the feeling of being watched, and the sudden appearance of shadows along the road. Even children are taught to respect the woods at night, warned that some spirits are bound to the land forever. The Headless Horseman, in many ways, represents more than a ghost. He embodies the past and the present, blending historical events with human imagination, fear, and folklore. He reminds all who enter Sleepy Hollow that history carries weight, that actions have consequences, and that some spirits refuse to rest until their stories are told and their grievances acknowledged. On foggy nights, when the moon barely lights the road, travelers report seeing him out of the corner of their eye. A figure without a head mounted on a horse that moves like the wind, disappearing as quickly as it appeared. The echo of hooves lingers long after the figure is gone, a reminder that some legends never die. Modern psychologists argue that the Headless Horseman may be a manifestation of anxiety, a projection of our deepest fears onto the landscape of the unknown. Folklorists insist that stories like Sleepy Hollow endure because they speak to timeless human concerns, loss, vengeance, and the fragility of life. And yet, despite rational explanations, the reports persist. Locals continue to recount encounters, and visitors continue to travel the winding roads in search of a glimpse, or perhaps a warning, from the phantom rider. The ghost of Sleepy Hollow has endured because it exists at the intersection of history, storytelling, and terror. It reminds us that legends are never just stories, they are living memories. Shadows cast across the land, waiting to be seen, felt, and remembered. For anyone traveling the back roads of the Hudson Valley at night, there is a lesson in the darkness. Some roads carry more than history. They carry spirits, and among them rides the Headless Horseman, silent, relentless, and impossible to ignore. And there you have it, to 25 of the scariest urban legends in America, each with its own unique blend of horror, mystery, and folklore. These stories remind us that fear is both timeless and universal, passed down through generations, evolving with every telling. Whether you believe in the supernatural or simply enjoy the thrill of a good scare, these legends continue to captivate, entertain, and haunt our imaginations. Thank you for joining us on this journey into America's darkest tales. Until next time, keep your lights on, your doors locked, and always watch the shadows. You never know what's lurking just out of sight.